all of our school board meetings till the very end. And whenever we need help, a committee, someone to do something, either she does it or she finds us someone, and she works with everyone in the district. And we can't say enough thank yous. So this is a thank you from the
My pleasure.
Well, you've got enough hands here. The good thing is we're not losing her.
That's right. She's only this far away. This far.
She is going to continue as the, is it a VP or, no, the Ledge advocacy person for PTSA. So she will continue to be advocating for our kids, as she has done so well for many, 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 many years. Okay, now on to our regular agenda.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. Tonight we've invited a number of our legislators to join us. As you all know, it was quite a session. Unprecedented budget deficits and an unprecedented set of legislation around the definition of basic education. It was hard work, and I consider our colleagues and the legislators our friends. We don't always agree, but we certainly are willing to work together to try and do the greater good. And so we've invited them to come and speak to us and give us an update on both the session as well as things that they're thinking about, and give the board an opportunity to possibly pose some additional questions. And so I'd like to leave it to Rodney to start maybe and invite each of our legislators to come and give us a wrap-up of the session and where we're headed. Thanks.
Thank you. As you said, it was a difficult session. We faced a $9 billion deficit, which is pretty unprecedented in Washington State history. But I think considering the circumstances, we did a lot of great things. House Bill 2261, as far as the basic ed, I think moves us forward. We still have a long ways to go in pretty much everything that we're looking at. Now I think the mic's working. The 2261, I think Eric will probably talk about this more because he really championed it from the Senate standpoint, moves us in the right direction. But again, it postpones, the big final question of, our ultimate end result until 2018. Well, quite frankly, most of us in the legislature probably won't be around in 2018. And so too often what's happened in the past, we always pick these magical dates far off into the future, and then they never come to fruition. So really the key to making sure that isn't just a piece of legislation, but that it does move our education system forward in the manner that I think all of us want to. It's going to take constant pressure. One of the things I look at is, Washington State's, probably the strongest language as far as our Constitution. It's our paramount duty. Paramount to me means first and foremost. But if you look at, budget-wise, where we've come, you take 2004 to 2011, K through 12 funding is going to go up about 30%. If you look at higher ed, we're up about 28%. You take a program called GAU, General Assistance Unemployable, it's up 152%. Okay, 152%. So I always kind of have to come back and say, yeah, we say it's our paramount duty, but do we really act that way? And that's what we need pressure from all the school districts. We need pressure from the PTAs. We need pressure from all the parents out there, because even though we pass that legislation, it's very much more of a framework than it is a specific plan. Going forward, we still have a lot to do. What we're trying to do from the Senate standpoint, and I have spoken with the Speaker, and I think this is very important for districts like Lake Washington, is what we did. Normally we have a September committee days. We moved that back a couple of weeks. till it's in October. We're going to have a September revenue forecast, September 17th. We'll get a little more information there. But what we're trying to do is probably have a one-day special session of those 3 days that we're going to use for committee days so that we can give districts more flexibility as far as local capacity, local levies. If you look at the three breakdowns, we had a bill coming forward at the last day of session that died. I think the reason why it died is there was some levy equalization tied to that. I think there's an agreement that we are going to break off the levy equalization. We'll deal with that at a different time, but we need to deal with the levy capacity. If you look at the numbers as far as the levy capacity, and this is why it's so important to give these districts flexibility, you're looking from the 728 to 732, which is the class size reduction and the teacher COLA. That increase, as far as assuming that the state had funded that, that's worth about $25 to $30 million in additional capacity every year. If you look at a lot of districts have what we call overcapacity, where they've actually, based upon parameters, because it's always a guess as far as how much your bonding is, they have oversubscribed to the tune of almost $130 million. So they're part of that bill that we'll be looking at will kind of allow those who have already had the vote to gather that money. But for districts like Lake Washington, what we said is, well, it's not really fair just to help those who have been grandfathered, who made that move. But if we're going to give people a 4% bump, we should give a 4% bump across the board. And so I think that will be the third element of that bill. So we'll have the 728 to 732 language. Currently, the way that we have that, or the latest draft that I have proposed, that takes that out to 2018, again, the year that we have memorialized through House Bill 2261, the basic ed bill. So that's kind of what I see going forward. From a budget standpoint, from the Senate standpoint, I had a lot of involvement in the budget this year. We just had a revenue forecast this past Thursday. The numbers are we're still in a very tough environment. We're down $685 million from our March forecast. So we thought March was very pessimistic. When we originally left town, we were aiming for $822 million in reserves. There was about $70 million that got left off of the table from the bills that didn't pass. The governor had another $80 million in vetoes. So, as quick as you can blink an eye, $150 million off of that 822 disappears. Then you have the 685 that's also coming in line. It looks like we'll have a caseload increase, which we'll get July 1st. That could be another $200 million hole. So, money is still evaporating rather quickly. The governor, in her wisdom, and I applaud her for this, is going to take some additional executive action to hopefully reduce another $200 to $250 million. But, we still have a sizable hole that we're going to have to come back and make up in January. I don't think that we'll have to, unless we get a big surprise in the September 17th forecast, I don't think we're going to have to do anything during that special session. We're reserving that time for that just in case we have to do some financial changes during that. But I think for that October committee days, hopefully we'll just deal with that levy capacity issue and then move forward. So that's my update. Any questions?
No, I would like to just, again, thank you, Senator Tom, for working on these levy capacity issues for us. As you know, should even the levy protection bill not pass, it would mean a $3 million per year impact for Lake Washington. And currently, under the current system, we're funded at 264th out of 295 districts, even though we're one of the most property wealthy districts in the state. And so these impacts are huge for us, and we appreciate your efforts and your advocacy for creating an equitable system of finance in the state.
Great.
But I have a question. You said 4% across the board. That's not fixing our equity issues. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
So
we're at 28.89% or something like that.
We're at 24.89.
24.89.
It would put us at
Big
28,
mistake.
but those that are Yeah, so yes, it would be, but there would be a cap of
35.
35. So
That's still a great inequity. That's a lot of money.
Right,
That's
but
not fixing the system.
Correct, but, as everybody realizes, sometimes fixing the system, takes a couple steps. I would say, though, that if you're at 24.89...
Which is all of King County, the minimum.
We said everybody could go to 35. I don't think you're going to see districts like Lake Washington say all of a sudden we're going to go from 24 to 35. I think most districts would do it incrementally. So that's why we thought this 4% increase was pretty fair, because quite frankly, most districts out there are telling us they'll probably use some of that. They don't know, even with their voters and with simple majority, if they'll be able to use the full 4%.
Well, I understand that, and that is an issue. I just don't understand somebody who's at 33% right now being able to go to 35 when we would still be at 29. Yeah, well, we don't need to have the discussion here. But I personally
and a
have
lot of
problems with
that,
that.
I think, and Senator Omega, I think, can address this. A lot of that, I think, we're going to be addressing as we move forward with the financial parameters of the basic ed bill and how we move forward. We have a lot of issues there. You have the levy issue and what percentage we're going to have that at, because there's some people that think, the paramount duty of the state means the state funds it. If you look at most funding structures will say that people like to vote at the local level. So you have to balance those needs there. There's cost of living factors, but there's also factors that like levy equalization, where there's poor districts out there that it's very hard for them to raise money. I mean, we can act all holy and good here on the east side and say, we're all for schools, what's wrong with these other crazies? But if we had to increase our property taxes by a factor of 8 or 10 or 14, like some of these districts need to do in order to raise the same amount on a per $1,000, I don't know how excited our constituencies would be with those kind of tax increases.
Well, for the record, I'm well aware of that issue, and I think levy equalization in the property poor districts in the state is a huge issue, because I work statewide. So I don't want to give the impression that that's my feeling. It's just that, excuse me, just raising it across the board 4% is what I'm going. That's not moving us towards equalization.
Right. Well, and just from my perspective, there are multiple issues of inequity.
Yeah,
they're just
exactly.
layered and layered and layered, and we know that. Right now, we're at a place where, while we know that those inequities, in order to unlayer them, peel the onion, if you will, you're not going to be able to do it all at once. So I believe that the charge, from my perspective of the legislature, is to begin working on those and working on those a system at a time. But in the meantime, we are starving. And this is a way to begin addressing the starving issue in the short term until those systemic issues can be dealt with. And I am going to advocate for dealing with the starving, so that in 18 months from now, we're not laying off $3 million worth of employees or more.
I'm not saying I don't want the 24.89% to increase. That is a different issue, because if we can have this discussion later.
We should.
And then
Yes, we should, because
the other thing that I think I will work on, and this is probably the most controversial element, levy equalization is very controversial. At my heart, I believe in levy equalization. I think the problem currently with our levy equalization formula, it is extremely random. If the purpose is there to help property poor districts, if you look at it on a per student basis, and I go by mill rates per thousand on a per student basis, it's so random when you look at those numbers. And what I want to do is make sure it's a $490 million program. It scares the heck out of me as a budget writer when I have $490 million worth of randomness in a budget. And so what I'm trying to do with that is not is not eliminate the program, is not help those districts, but to help districts in a very rational basis, and I think we can make that correction next year.
Thank you.
Senator, I just want to say that I appreciate, and since you were in the House as well, your personal involvement in this issue and trying to get to the bottom of it, so I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Roger.
Well, good evening. Now that you've heard Senator Tom describe what it was like to make the difficult decisions, you know why I chose intentionally not to be on any of the fiscal committees in the House. I deal with public safety and the judiciary, and although early learning is actually my big focus when it comes to education. I, in this vein, put my confidence in the budget writers, didn't lobby for anything specific, watched them do their work, and they did the best they could. They did a great job. And I came away from it, even though I'm sort of on the inside of government, with a greater sense of confidence in government, and it sort of was an awakening. Just want to say that. I also want to congratulate you, not only the superintendent, but the board, for working with you in a heroic effort in working through your budget so that there won't be any layoffs. Other districts are in much more dire circumstances, so congratulations. Great job. As I said, early learning is sort of the niche that I'm carving out. Sponsored a bill a couple years ago to get the Head Start, the federal Head Start and the state ECAP program more aligned, both in terms of process and also funding. And so that's just another study. Of the successes, without a doubt, the Ed Reform Bill was the big highlight this year. I was a cheerleader from the sidelines. But we can't wait for reform. We need more local control and accountability and transparency, and certainly more funding, but that's really on a separate track. You have to know how the process works. Reform's going to take a while, and the funding is going to come with it over that while. The big disappointment was early learning. The early learning part of the bill was vetoed, and as far as I'm concerned, we should spend those limited resources that we're trying to get all-day kindergarten in throughout the state. Right now, we should be spending that on early learning because that's a bigger bang for the buck. And when I say early learning, this isn't just preschool. It's the wide range of even prenatal services all the way to when a child arrives in kindergarten in good health with the social emotional skills and ready to succeed. Now, the governor in her veto message said that she's ordering OSPI and the Department of Early Learning to work on a legislative proposal for 2010 for early learning. The concern on the surface seemed to be a lack of universality, that we are merely applying our early learning resources to those neighborhoods and those kids who are most disadvantaged. Of course, as I said, it's the biggest bang for the buck. And the evidence shows if you peanut butter it, if you spread it too thin, it's really not effective. You have to have rich investment when it comes to early learning and making it effective. That's why focusing on the disadvantaged is most effective. Nevertheless, let's see what the proposal looks like. I want to continue to take a lead on early learning because I think, well, I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old at home, so when I cross the threshold of my house, it's my daily experience. But I really think kids need to be ready to learn when they get to kindergarten. So other than that, I spent most of my time trying to fix the justice system, which is another major task. Talk about squandering hundreds of millions of dollars. I'd like to try to reorganize that so we can reinvest in education and in healthcare rather than needlessly locking people up. So that's the bee in my bonnet. Yeah. But with that, any questions, but I'll just conclude. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Deb Eddy. I represent the 48th District with Senator Tom and Representative Ross Hunter. And as you are more than aware, Ross and Rodney have cornered the education issue for the 48th. And while I'm not going to say I don't pay attention, but I have not tried to become the expert that they are, believing that my talents are better used elsewhere. That said, we do have an energy in the House directed at education that is more than I saw during my first term. And so while this session seemed to be all bad news, I want to give you what I saw as the good news. And it's this. Compared to my first term in office, I saw a lot more people in Olympia lobbying and advocating on behalf of education this year than in the 06-07 term. And it was a broader array of people. It wasn't the usual suspects. There were more groups in the hallways, and I couldn't always I couldn't always identify who was stopping me to talk about education, which I had been able to do during the first session. I consider that a very good sign. We also had this year a really impressive freshman class of legislators. In a House of 98 people, in a Democratic caucus of 62. That's a really supersized classroom. The group dynamics are kind of an interesting thing to watch, to see how aggressive people get in talking about their issues and pushing back against what can sometimes feel like we're headed for the lowest common denominator. The freshman class this year was not going to leave Olympia without a redefinition of education, and they made it their number one priority, and they made sure that nobody forgot it. And that ability of that group of young legislators to come together with a mission, I think, meant an awful lot. And as I see them go forward in the future, I think that we will see, I would like to believe we will see faster progress on things like the equalization, removing or fixing some of those inequities, which I appreciate were, at least some of them, on the PTSA agenda when I was a PTSA mom back in the 1980s. My emphasis is on transportation, technology, energy, and communications, and I'm very grateful that you gave us the chance for the wrap-up tonight, and I'm available for questions.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening. I made a couple of quick notes, but I think I'll start out by saying thanks to you, Chip, and your staff during the session for being available as a resource. Chip also came down to Olympia and testified to committee, and that's actually a really important role, and I'd like to see us. We passed a pretty historic bill. Rodney talked about 2261. I'll talk a bit about what that means, but what it's really going to mean is lots of lobbying. If there was any way to do a bill that was kind of the be-all, end-all, we could tie everything up, that'd be great. But the reality is there's a whole bunch of things, and this is a pathway and a pipeline to getting the kinds of changes we need in the financial structure and the accountability pieces and the transparency. And the first thing up out of the gate is going to be transparency in funding with what we call the prototypical school funding model. And people are going to be lobbying like heck, saying, hey, this is basic ed, we need more librarians or social workers or whatever, and we could really use your help. And to that end, I want to talk about maybe having a more symbiotic relationship with some of the smaller districts, because I know Chip was right down there telling us how important levy equalization is. But the smaller districts, on the other hand, are not helping on boosting your lids. And I think there's got to be a give and take. And systems work when people understand the whole and they're working collectively to improve everybody, not just fighting and clutching and trying to protect their own self-interest. You talked about, Chip, tonight about preventing starvation. That's really excellent. At the same time, you're still trying to help out these other smaller districts. One thing that North Shore started doing this year and was extremely helpful, and I think this board can do the same thing, is they picked a member of their board to come down to Olympia on a fairly regular basis, which let us know what kinds of issues they were working on, how they were handling the budget, how they were handling their outreach in the community, and it was I just thought it was very helpful. As me working with my colleagues to tell firsthand stories about what their board is struggling with, and then for them to be able to replay that back in their community is helpful. And like I say, as we're going forward, 2261 created something called the Quality Education Council, and this is in addition to what we already think of as the ed committees in both the House and the Senate, but now another committee of key stakeholders who are going to be working on crafting policy direction. I will sit on that committee. I've been appointed, and I guess that's just one more channel for us to work to get to the kinds of policies that, I don't want to re-scratch the surface of levy equalization or levy lids or all this, or salary equalization. I think everyone sitting in this room understands the pathologies there, and the Quality Education Council and the task groups that we're spinning off because of 2261 are working squarely to solve these problems. I'd like you guys to help. Finally, I want to hit a local issue, which is the Broadhurst petition. And I think here again, systems work when we think about what's best for the kids. And I hope you'll continue to think about how, I think one of the members here described that border, that boundary, as perhaps written by someone who is drunk or under the influence. and another comment about, maybe if there are a few more people, they'd consider this. But I think the reality is when we're talking about kids and families and safety, and it's really less about what's convenient or most beneficial to the districts, and it's more about getting the best thing to those kids and those families. And happy to take any questions.
Senator, I went to our state association meeting this weekend, and one of the things that came up, and I'd like to have it on your radar screen, is what you intimated towards. That is one of the committees that came out of 2261. There's going to be a proliferation of different committees and moving parts as we go forward with this. And one of the concerns that's beginning to be more widely known in the K-12 community is how the work of all these different moving parts is going to be funneled down so that people like us and superintendents and teachers ultimately are going to know what to do and have some clear direction. And so as we move forward with kind of, the devil's in the details of education reform, as we begin to put that all together, keep in mind that eventually these changes are going to have to be communicated clearly to those of us who are going to have to be tasked with implementing. And at the moment, I think a lot of us are anxious about where all these moving parts are going to be, corralled. And so I guess if I made one plea tonight, it would be to keep that concern in mind.
Heard loud and clear. Thank you. And if there's a question in there, I might answer it this way, and to say that we certainly understand that the legislative process has been, hey, hero bill, pander bill, great idea bill. Some things are half-baked, some things are really, worked through the system really well. But whatever comes out of that pipeline impacts you guys. And we have recognized, and we're making when I say we, I mean the legislative body as well as OSPI. We're trying to take a more systems organized approach to saying, how can we stage new policy and have this kind of a funneling thing. And one of the Quality Education Council, I think, purpose there is to help in that, is to harmonize some of the different policy directions. And where we're doing the daylight on funding and policy, if policy is good policy, it should stand up the more eyes and the more daylight we put on it. So if we're going to do a librarian bill, that should go through all the different processes. It should be visible, and it doesn't get hidden in a budget somewhere, or it doesn't come out as a hero bill, but we actually talk about it in the context and the trade-offs, and we weigh these things. So we are definitely trying to make an organized effort about understanding that from the time that we pass it out of Olympia, that we stage it and make some kind of a reasonable, no start times, 90 days hence, but, in the 1 to 2 years out, because that's what realistically happens for you.
So, in the context of this year's session, 2261 does a good job of trying to reframe the definitions of basic ed, but punts some of the money questions down the road. And to me, this is really important because we've got a lot of attention on education reform going this year. And is it next year? We've got a biennial budget system, so next year it'll probably be fine-tuning and minor things. When do we need to show up in force, or rather, when do we need to mobilize PTAs to get the education voters really back on this task? And this is to all of you. This is because we are going to have to figure out the money, and I want to make sure that everybody knows when we need to show up in force.
I don't think
again.
you ever want to get off.
I know.
I'll
give you that.
I don't think you ever want to turn that off. Let me be clear. 2261 starts first with saying we're going to do evidence-based education. We're going to do some hard reports. One of the first bills I did my first year was collecting rich and interesting data on school performance. 2261 says, you know what, it's politically uncomfortable, it makes people squirm, but we're going to start reporting these data and holding people accountable. It also sets a roadmap for funding, and guess what we cut? We said, yeah, we want to redefine basic ed, and we set a roadmap to that. And then we also cut education this year. And Rodney popped up here, and he's going to tell you, in the next budget he writes in 2 years from now, it's going to be even worse than the one he wrote this year. And there's going to be other moving parts, and things are going to be sometimes connected to ed and sometimes not, but anything that has to do with a fiscal nature or tax policy reform, your ears should be pricking up really wide. I'll let Rodney jump on that, too.
Yeah, I think it'd be a huge mistake to wait till the next biennial budget. Next year is going to be very important. We could be very well addressing some issues next session. I think we will have to address, probably several hundred. If the forecast stays where it's at today, we're still going to have to address maybe $500 million worth of cuts somewhere. When education is 41% of our budget, it's still, I look at, and there's not, in some of these programs, there's not a whole lot of money left. I can tell you that we thought this budget forecast that we got last Thursday could have been anywhere from $500 million to $1.2 billion. And so I was given a big list of areas where we could cut. I will say, sadly, a lot of those areas were in education. So I think vigilance is extremely important. The squeaky wheel definitely does get heard in Olympia. And I think Eric referenced it. The 2011 budget, quite frankly, could be a tougher budget than this year. I mean, we did have the blessing from the Obama administration of $3 billion in federal stimulus. Without those dollars, I don't know what would have happened. But one of the tricks that happens in Olympia is you realize in this kind of budget environment that no new programs are going to get funded. But everybody always has the flavor of the month. And so what really transpired is we did implement a lot of bills, but the funding was going to kick in 2011. So we had a lot of new legislation that are going to be fighting for those scarce dollars then. I think that this next budget, the supplemental budget, we're going to have some real honest discussions on those bills and maybe just say, folks, these are nice ideas, but, we got a lot in the pipeline with our current, programs that we're not funding. Let's address those issues before we go on to these new ones. So I think it's extremely incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we're down there, when we're down there for special session, people need to be down there. When we get down there in January, the voices need to be heard. Because if not, education, the general employment unassisted, GAU, that example, we keep saying it's our paramount duty, but when you look at the numbers, it's not there. We just had a work session and we were talking about graduation requirements in our district, and one of the conversations that came up was Core 24.
And Core 24 being a healthy new set of requirements for students in order to make sure that they're college-ready, future-ready, et cetera. And yet, there is really no way that we can implement Core 24 under the current funding structure, and yet there are so many problems to fix before we even start talking about additional minutes in classrooms, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about where you see Core 24 fitting, and give us some perspective on how high of a priority is it as compared to some of the other really important things that need funding, and as a local entity, how we should deal with that dilemma that's created?
Well, anytime you're talking additional class time, it is enormously expensive. So when it comes to Core 24, and Senator Omeg might correct me if he thinks differently, but I think the dollars involved in Core 24 are of such magnitude that for us to go forward with that, if we're looking at that 2018, I think you're looking at tying probably that program with a revenue stream. I think without a new revenue stream associated with that, I think the dollars are of such a magnitude, we're not going to get there through natural budget growth. And so I think all of us recognize the importance in a 21st century economy that all of our students have the basis that a lot of our districts are able to do, but they're able to do that with local dollars. We need to be able to do that for every district on a statewide basis, so that every child has the kind of education we want. But I think in the end, I think that will require a new revenue stream, and that's going to take a vote of the people, and we'll have to see at that point what kind of appetite there is for new dollars.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Chris, for your question. Looking just beyond, not just over the next couple of years, but what do we do into the future? And three things come to mind. One is in the short to near term, echoing what Deb Eddy said, there is more of a consensus to focus on education than we've seen in a long time in the legislature. So as we cut, we're going to cut education the least. And that's what happened this year. In the long term, I don't think we're going to be able to fund education without a serious conversation about restructuring our revenue system. It's unfair and it's unstable now, and there's not a lot of leadership at the moment there's some leadership, not enough, to get that conversation going. And I wanted to bring up teacher evaluation, teacher compensation. We can't forget about that. That might not have been part of the bill, but looking into the future, here's a lesson actually we can learn from the early learning field, where the evidence is so clear that in the early learning professional, let's just say the teacher's behavior in the classroom, the one-on-one interaction with the students matters more than anything else. And where we know that teacher quality matters more than anything else, more than class size and maybe more than parental involvement, we need to make sure that our teachers are evaluated in a way that the research shows is effective, not they're merely having a particular degree hanging on the wall, which could be helpful. Needless to say, there was resistance, and there were a lot of fireworks, and we had a smackdown. It was a pay-per-view event.
Just a little.
But we can't forget that issue. There's another working group and committee coming out of the bill for sure. But I really think we need to get into that again, so that our teachers are the best quality, and that means evaluating what they do in the classroom. And so I hope we get there.
Just a point of clarification, if I recall, the COLA suspension provision, did it indeed include a makeup provision so that there's some guarantees legislatively that there is a makeup provision?
Yes, it did. I actually was able to vote against suspending 728, but of course I voted for the budget, so I was appropriately mealy-mouthed about that one. But
I would absolutely encourage you to come down and lobby hard, even if we're having to cut, because I think that that message of cutting education less than everything else is something that people need to hear again and again. I was kind of surprised internally to the legislature, the folks who would push back a little bit about that. And it does come from having an aging and, frankly, a very needy population. So there are competing needs out there. And then we come back to the paramount duty. One of the things that we talked about going forward, though, that I want to encourage all of us as education advocates to not forget, is that the day will come that the revenue starts coming back. And when it does, and I think my colleagues have mentioned, it gets to be a bit of a, what shall we call it? No, well, let's say there's lots of priorities and everybody's arguing for their priorities. And we end up with what I describe as a little bit of mission creep. Everybody comes to Olympia with a great idea and it's just, $250,000, maybe $500,000. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. So to the degree that we as advocates for education can make sure that as money starts flowing back into the state's coffers, that there is a real understanding that education has a claim on that, I'm going to say this, before yet another cute program over at CTED.
We've talked about 2261, and I know, or at least I've heard, that there is some plans of working through making this happen before 2018. Can you tell us what's going to be done here in the next few months, the next year, some plans about, beefing that up and actually getting some real meat to it? I think that would be helpful to, people watching, even though they're not in this audience, we're on TV and we are on the internet, and we have lots of folks that watch. So if they're interested in, finding out what you're doing, tell us where they can go look, so they can gather information. I think that'd be really helpful.
So I think the question is, how do we see maybe the next 10 years playing out? And we put together a kind of a pretty good timeline of things that will transpire. But one of your comments about meaty or teethy or something, 2261 actually has some pretty solid teeth in it. We do make a promise of getting 24 credits as a requirement by the end, by 2018. And I think Rodney was responding to a question about, your question about Core 24. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, in that language, we said, look, you don't, State Board, you don't get to say Core 24 is a grad requirement until the legislature's funded it, plain and simple. But we said that's basically what it means to be world-class and college-ready, is 24 credits. So we have to pay for that. Now, when is that money going to be there? Well, I think I've already assured you it's not coming in the next 4 years. But that is something that we have to work on. And so there is a very important point to make. And that's Washington Learns and the Basic Ed Financing Task Force have spent years studying, looking, and coming up with great conclusions and suggestions. And when I sat there trying to write bill language, there were still pieces that were missing. First, the money, but also where exactly to draw some lines. And so when people talk about these work groups being spun off and maybe creating, maybe some anxiety, the reality is that's staff that's going to crunch numbers and tell us where the hold harmless is on the current formula as we switch to the other one. So that we say, we're going to switch to how we appropriate money. We're going to do it in a way that doesn't, create winners and losers. And those data were not at hand. So had we even had some money to start implementing, say, a new salary allocation model for teachers, I don't think that anyone could say we had the perfect, well-vetted new model. The original proposal had X's in it, indicating there was work to be done. So when we talk about groups doing this work, it's legitimate, objective number crunching work that has to be done, mixed with some policy that's going to have to go through the legislative process. Hope that answered the question of the time frames.
I'd like to describe for you guys just an experience I had in the last 3 months internally here, because it might be informative as you're continuing to do your work. When the original bill, Basic Ed bill, started spinning up, and there were a number of issues that came up, of course, one of them being the compensation model and the evaluation model. And it became, the rhetoric inside of this system, we have 1,500 teachers, became fierce. And I was uncomfortable with that. And so over a period of 5 weeks, I did 50 staff meetings that were open mic staff meetings in order to answer questions around this. And what was interesting is that as I presented and answered questions was There is not universal agreement, of course, around performance pay. There's not universal agreement around evaluation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But where there was universal agreement was every single teacher in our system was insulted about the master's degree question, even though we know that the research indicates that a master's degree does not drive teacher performance. We know that. And so I guess my urging for you is to think about the emotional impact as you're thinking about this legislation, because that single thing was universal across all 1,500 teachers as I spoke to them. Even though I could talk to people and say, I do believe in performance systems. I do believe that we need to think about rethinking teacher quality and those kinds of things. And I got nods in the room. But the master's degree became so emotional, it completely blew up. And so I just wanted to give you that as feedback of what happened internally here as you're continuing to think about the systems. And I don't know how you get out of that box you're in, because if it's a broken system, but you have this emotionality around the system, it stays broken. I mean, I get you're in a total box, but I just wanted to describe the dilemma that it creates internally.
Thanks for that feedback. That's very helpful. And in fact, coming back to this having a legislative relationship during session, those would be just the kinds of things we could talk about.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. We did, believe me, we heard loudly and clearly about the master's issue as well through various sources. And I think in the original proposal, we did a salary grandfathering for 10 years.
Yeah.
And, the reality is it'll have to be a perpetual one. As long as you want, but we think that we'll design a salary structure that's so compelling that teachers will want to move over.
Yes.
And so we can totally honor what credentialing has happened in the past, where teachers have earned and worked their way into the ladder, and then say, and then here's this alternative ladder that you can opt into. And if you're at the top of the scale over here, great, stay right where you are. But like I say, we do think that in balance, there will be enough incentives and things to attract teachers over.
Yep, and we would support that. Great, thanks.
Any other questions from anyone for our four legislators? A couple things. One, thank you for taking your time to come this evening and share with us. Appreciate this. We've started doing this the last several years. I think it's really helpful not only to the board, but to anyone that's also listening, to have another venue to hear from all of you. Tonight is our budget presentation, so if you have time and would like to stay and listen to how it's coming down the pike, those dollars are going to be allocated this year, a lot less of them than we would like, but they're there. Please feel free to stay. We'd love to have you. But again, thank you. But I understand also if you're busy and you need to scoot out the door, that would be okay as well.
Great. Thank you again. Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Consent agenda. Oh, no, sorry, public comment. Sorry, I almost skipped a whole piece of my agenda item here. Do we just have one on there? Is it Wendy? Yes. I got mine in before she came up.
And I will actually be quite brief. In one of my last acts as the president of the PTSA Council, first of all, I want to thank you for the recognition tonight. Yes, it's been busy. It's been a full 2 years. My house certainly shows that, as I haven't been home much to tend to it. But it has been a distinct pleasure to do this as the council president, part of it being all of the wonderful people that you get to interact with, including yourselves. And so it's been a wonderful experience. It's been a learning experience, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything, although my husband will probably be glad to have a few home-cooked meals. But my primary purpose for addressing you tonight is just to publicly thank you. If you think I was busy the last 2 years, it's nothing compared to what these folks up here on the dais do. They serve voluntarily. In fact, it costs them money to get elected in many cases, and they willingly pay that money so that they can serve on this school board. Their dedication is unparalleled. They are, in their hearts, they just care so much for the children and for making sure that we have the best system available to educate our children. It's just a phenomenal thing to find people in the public that are willing to dedicate themselves and devote so much time for the good of all the children in this district. So I just want to thank you and have you know that we appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you, Wendy. That was very, very nice. Thank you very much. And as I said, I am so glad you'll still be sitting here with all of us.
Yep. Hey, John, would you mind seeing if that projector can be turned off? I think it's on the remote back there. It's not up here.
Oh, well, I'm just going to...
Yeah, thanks.
Uncombine.
Okay, now consent agenda. Oh,
Move
approval. I went to sleep. Sorry. Okay, Doug moved. Nancy second? Second. Okay.
Chris. Chris? Nancy?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Great.
It's really interesting. Almost every time I write myself a note before consent agenda because this is where I mess up in a board meeting. And lo and behold, I didn't write myself the note to do it, and look what happened.
Yes, and also, as you know, we normally look at the donations even though they're in the consent agenda, and that's under tab 7. And tonight we have, let's turn the page here, $56,948 in donations from our community. We have a $2,534 donation from the Alcott PTSA to Alcott Elementary School for the Jan Gardner Memorial Bench. And as you know, Jan Gardner was a teacher who worked in our district who passed away this year, so that's a very special donation for that school. And $1,000 for copier supplies in that donation as well. $1,550 donation from the Lake Washington Schools Foundation to Kamiakin Junior High School to assist low-income families with fees and other associated costs. $10,340 from the Blackwell PTSA to Blackwell Elementary School to purchase and install additional playground equipment. $2,114 from the Einstein PTSA to Einstein Elementary School for library books. $4,999 from the Wilder PTSA to Wilder for a variety of instructional materials, including special education books, hardcover book series called Bright Source, calculators, reader board letters, etc. $2,260 donation from the Finn Hill PTSA to Finn Hill Junior High School to purchase items requested from the Fund in Need, which includes faxes, paper, cordless trimmer, books, art supplies, toner, and other various supplies. An $8,000 donation from the International Community School PTSA to ICS to support extracurricular activities as well as curriculum enrichment. $2,000 donation from the American Association of University Women to John Muir Elementary School to support their international club activities. $8,482 donation from the Carson PTSA to Carson Elementary School to purchase and install brick pavers at the school and to provide a stipend for their webmaster. A $6,211 donation from the Inglewood Junior High School PTSA to Inglewood Junior High School for, again, a variety of materials, including curriculum materials, counseling, staff development materials, etc. A $6,607 donation from the Renaissance School PTSA to Renaissance Choice School to support the outdoor ed program, and an $1,847 donation from the Samantha Smith PTSA to Smith Elementary School to purchase accelerated reader books and tests for, again, a total of $56,948. As an editorial comment around our donations, as you know, we did have significant budget cuts this year, and we know that there's going to be a greater reliance upon the donations of our community to cover things like student fees and athletic fees and other things that are in place for students, and we just continue to appreciate the generosity of our community.
Yes, indeed. And again, thank you to all the PTSAs. As we've said all along, is that what we see here is the dollar amounts that are $1,000 or greater from the various organizations and PTSAs that donate. And that's to me is the tip of the iceberg, because there's a lot of other dollars that are donated that are lesser amounts that don't have to come before the board, and that doesn't even touch the amount of time each parent that volunteers in the schools and participates in activities. And I would imagine with building budgets being down a little bit next year as part of the budget cuts, that they will be asking and be relied upon even more for the things that they do.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. Under tab 8, under non-consent agenda items, we have our first reading of our 2009-2010 budget. As you know, you've been briefed on the budget, and this has been a challenging budget year. The state, as our legislators described, was faced with a $9 billion deficit, and even with $3 billion worth of stimulus money that was generously provided by the federal government, there was still a significant hole in the budget. And even though education proportionally received a smaller proportion of the cuts than many other programs in the state, those cuts were still extremely challenging. In Lake Washington, that budget hole came to the tune of about an $8 million deficit that we needed to make up. Our normal budget process, as you know, is that our team will begin grappling with the budget situation. In some cases we are adding, in other cases we are subtracting, and in other cases we are staying the same. Our approach to budgeting tends to be multi-year, and it tends to be conservative in nature, and it tends to be priority driven. And those things didn't change this year and won't ever change. What did change, of course, is the size of the deficit. The last time we did, well, matter of fact, in my history, which I'm finishing my 13th year in the district, we've never had this kind of a budget situation. We have made cuts progressively over the last 7 or 8 years. We did 2 pretty sizable cuts, but in both cases, those cuts were about half of what we did this time around. So our normal process is that we'll begin working on the budget. We will take it to DART, which is the Decision Advisory Representative Team, which represents principals and central office folks and professional technical staff. And a budget will be developed after collecting typically survey data from our community on their priorities, and those priorities will drive a budget recommendation that will come to me, and ultimately that budget recommendation will be made to the board. The board will provide feedback for that budget recommendation and then ultimately approve it. As we were thinking about the budget process this time around, we found that simply asking for our priorities was inadequate. And so we invented a new process this year for our budget, which we not only went to the community and asked them for their priorities, which we did, but we also asked them to help us with trade-offs. And so we held 4 community meetings and 3 staff meetings where we invited people to come and actually helped us do the math, where we looked at, if these things are your priorities, then what are you willing to trade off in order to protect those things from the budget cuts? So, for example, 728 in our district pays for 4 things primarily: class size reduction in K-1, it pays for safety net programs for struggling students, it pays for preschool programs, and it pays for professional development. If, for example, class size reduction is a priority for our community, then what are we willing to not do, or what are we willing to pay for in order to protect class size inside of our community? And ultimately, those class size reductions translated into teaching jobs inside of our system. And so we took this work to our community. We had 1,200 community members show up. We also had a large number of our staff show up and give us input. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot about a positive process. It confirmed a number of things that we believed. We also gained some new information, and we were given some really good feedback for the budget development process. This budget reflects both that input and those trade-offs that the community was willing to make. They're hard trade-offs in many instances. We, 2 weeks ago, talked about athletic fee increases, and we're going to be having some of the most expensive athletic fees in the region as a result of those trade-offs and not wanting to impact class size as an example. We've also got a number of other things that we're sacrificing, including a 20% reduction in central administration, including the elimination of elementary school vice principals, including the 75% reduction in professional development, including a number of things that are certainly important to us, but are less central than keeping teachers in classrooms with kids. This budget reflects that. We don't think that the hard work is over because, as you know, a large portion of that budget is supported by federal stimulus dollars. Those federal stimulus dollars disappear in 24 months. At that time, we have every expectation that we're going to have to deal with the fact that the stimulus money is gone, and it appears that the economic recovery, which we're dependent upon for our budget, is a slow growth recovery. And so we are not convinced that the likelihood that it will be fully recovered to the point where we will not have to absorb some of those stimulus, that stimulus package. We just don't believe that that's realistic at this point, although I would love to be surprised. The good news part of the budget is that we are not experiencing a decline in enrollment. As a matter of fact, we budget conservatively on enrollment, and our budget projections are that we're flat even though we're experiencing just a smidge of growth. And it appears that starting in 2010, 2011, we're going to experience a slight uptick in growth, and it's going to be coming into the system at the lower grades, which means it will work through our system over a period of time. And that's very good news for us. We also, the other part of the good news is that we have a supportive community that continues to support our levies and continues to support our capital levy as well as our bond measures. So with that, I'm going to invite Barbara Posthumus to come and present the board with our budget. As a reminder, from a process standpoint, this is the first reading of the budget. This is for you as well as the community. Next board meeting, we will hold a public hearing. And after that public hearing, then the board will decide to approve or not approve that budget. We have considered, there was a little bit of email traffic today around the order of the hearing and when we have the hearing, et cetera. And I think it'd be worth just having that conversation down the road after we get through this particular budget cycle and determine whether the order that we do that is the most appropriate. Barbara.
In the meantime, since it's too late this year to change it, we do want to encourage people to let us know early, because if they wait till August, it's almost too late to do anything. Although this year, you know, as opposed to other years, we've had a considerable public input already, which is wonderful.
And my hope, I think last year we had some availability on the website for people to respond to the budget and send comments in. I think that's a good place for it. I think the piece before we have Barbara go on this issue is the timing, is that it's hard when it's something that's not very simple, because the budget is not a simple document to get out to the public ahead of time to read. That having a public hearing now before they've actually had a time to read it and delve into it. So when we have done other things before, we've done them between the two meetings. So we used to go out and about. We used to go to the various high schools and do public hearings, and we stopped having people come. So we started looking at other things. Now, it may be a time that this changes, but we, I think, can evaluate after we see what kind of input we get between now and August 10th, which is when the next meeting is, to have the budget second hearing and public hearing, how much input that we get for us to have that conversation of what to do.
And I would also just like to thank each of the board members that I know that at these public meetings, there was a tremendous board presence at those meetings, and it was appreciated. I know that I heard a number of comments of of the presence of both central office staff and school board members at those meetings was noticed and appreciated by the community. So thank you for showing up.
I have another quick question about the enrollment, because I knew somewhere I'd seen the numbers, but apparently it was in the facility plan. Because you do have us going up a little bit even next year, not flat. So that's the number we're working on, the 23,871.
Yes, and keep in mind that, projections are tricky.
I know.
And so we budget conservatively on enrollment, because if we end up being under 100 students, for example, then we have a serious budget problem. And so we are actually, for this year, budgeting on flat enrollments, correct?
Yeah, and the capital facilities plan is based on projections only, and it's based on full development, move ahead. So it's done for different purposes. It's really to look at the maximum capacity. When we budget for enrollment, we at elementary, we actually use our elementary projections with half development, and then at secondary, we're using actual registrations. So we're fine-tuning the enrollment projections for the budget, and we actually are projected about a 200 student increase in elementary and a 200 student decline in secondary, and overall decline of 58 overall, but the majority of the decline is in secondary.
Right. And just from a historical perspective, there was a time when we did our, again, facility projections on full enrollment and our enrollment projections on no development, and they were more conservative than they are today. We found at that time that they were a bit overly conservative, so the move forwards plus half a development seems to hit a pretty good mark. So if you look at our actuals versus our projecteds over the last year or two, we're in most cases between 20 and 80 students off. In a district of 24,000 students, that's a pretty good margin of error. So that's the methodology that we're using.
Okay. All right, thank you. I will get started. Well, I'm very pleased tonight to present the 2009-10 proposed budget. And I really am very pleased because tonight represents kind of a culmination of a very difficult, unprecedented budget year. So last year, I was looking back at last year's presentation, and last year at this time I said we do not anticipate further budget cuts unless legislative action, impending legislative action. Well, how quickly things change and how severe things change. So in the many years that I've worked here, I've not seen these severe cuts. And I think Janine, who, by the way, for those of you who don't know, received her 30 years of service pin last week, I believe Janine, in her 30 years, has not seen this level of cuts either. So I just wanted to get that plug in for you, Janine.
And I'm looking forward to awarding her 45-year pin.
Everybody has to remember Janine was a very mere youth when she started with us.
So,
and that's true.
Yeah. So on top of the state cuts, we also received new federal stimulus dollars, which added to the level of complexity. OSPI, who's doing great work, and they have great staff there, but they did not have rules until very late. So it just became, this has been one of the most complex budgets that I've worked on and put together, and complex budgets to try to explain to you tonight. So if you see me using my notes a lot, I apologize, but I want to make sure I'm very clear in my explanation to you on this budget. And I do want to thank Chip and the board for making the budget reduction decisions early in May. That really helped my staff and I get this budget done on time, frankly. And and I also want to thank Lynn Pike, who's the budget manager. She's not here tonight, but she really does all the nitty-gritty work. And every time we had a federal a different decision on the federal money, she was there moving money around. So every time OSPI gave us new instructions. So let me talk about the documents that you have in front of you. The first document is the draft budget summary, and this is just a summary of our general fund budget. And we make sure that each building has this document, so if a parent or community member has questions about the budget, building principals can offer this document to them. The second document is what we call the F-195. This is the actual document that you adopt, and it's the format that is consistent statewide. Every district in the state has this format. And then the last document is the detailed information by fund. So this gives you details by each fund and some comparisons, and so we'll talk more about that. So those are the documents you have. Okay, so first I'm going to, the majority of my presentation tonight will of course be spent on the general fund, but I'm going to start with an overview of all the funds, talk about the funds that besides the general fund, then we'll go into the general fund. So our budget is comprised of the general fund of $216.7 million, and that's the day-to-day operating fund for the district. The associated body fund is $3.8 million, and those are the extracurricular activities of the district. The debt service fund is $42.3 million, and that provides for the redemption and payment interest on principal and interest on bonds. Capital projects fund of $95.7 million, and that provides the expenditures for modernization program and our capital facilities and technology levies. And then the last fund, the transportation vehicle fund, has a budget of about $700,000 this year, and that provides for purchases of student buses. So total funds we're working with, $359.2 million. The associated student body fund is again the extracurricular activities of the district. Revenues come in from fees and extra fundraisers and sales and sports, and expenditures are sports and clubs, and each school develops their own budget, and then their budget is consolidated into one district budget. The beginning fund balance for ASB is $758,000 with revenues of $3.6 million, expenditures of $3.8 million for an ending fund balance of $583,000. And just like the general fund, the ASB fund balances are declining, and so they're going to be struggling more and more with keeping their revenues in line with their expenditures. So the debt service fund beginning fund balance is $12.1 million, revenues of $38.1 million, and those revenues come from levies and interest. Expenditure budget of $42.3 million, and again that's the redemption payment of interest and principal on bonds, and that expenditure budget does include the pending fourth bond sale for phase 2 modernization that we've been selling bonds each year in the fall, and this budget reflects that. So an ending fund balance of almost $8 million. The capital projects fund is beginning fund balance of $202 million, revenues of $120 million, and that does include $100 million contingency for the planned bond sale. We won't determine the final amount of the bond sale until the fall. We've been selling about $80 million each year, and we'll determine that closer to the fall. Revenue comes from state matching monies, investment earnings, impact and mitigation fees, and levies or bonds. We also, so total revenues of $120 million. We also transfer now, due to an accounting change from the state, $4.7 million of expenditure or of revenues to the general fund. So we spend money on capital-related activities, but the state last year required us to charge those to the general fund and transfer the revenue from capital. So we're spending on $95.6 million, and I'll talk about that in detail. Ending fund balance of $222.6. So the projects for capital next year are our Phase 2 modernization projects. Frost will be completed and opened in the fall of 2010. Construction is continuing on Lake Washington High School and will begin at Finn Hill Junior, I believe, in the late spring, summer. Planning at Muir, Rush, Sandburg, and Rose Hill Junior. And then ongoing levy projects for energy and building systems, field improvements, and equipment, software, and training. And the last fund is Transportation Vehicle Fund, and the beginning fund balance of $1.1 million, revenues of $1 million, and those revenues are primarily state depreciation funds and interest earnings, and then carryover from the levy that was voted in the year 2000. The expenditures of $750, we're only planning on buying about 3 buses next year, so the expenditures are for 3 buses plus contingency in case our plans change, for an ending fund balance of 1.5. And the new buses we're buying are more fuel efficient, so that's helping save the general fund side, the fuel costs on the general fund side. All right, on to the general fund. So I'll start with the overview of the proposed budget, and then we'll talk about key changes and state cuts and district changes. So the general fund beginning fund balance is $13 million. Revenue is expected to be $212.7 plus the $4.7 from the capital, so a total revenue of $217.5, and expenditures of $216.7 for an ending fund balance of almost $13.8 million. So the $13.8 million represents about 6.3%, or about $2.9 million above our 5% fund balance requirement. And so included in that number is about 1.3%, or $1.3 million, of I-728 carryover. And then the remaining, so we're reserving that fund, that's one-time money that once you spend it, it's gone. And one of the things we're kind of reserving those funds for is a couple of things, is to deal with unknown budget cut impacts. For example, if the fees that we estimated in our budget don't come in, or also if some of the cost savings that we planned, don't come to fruition. For example, in utilities, we projected cost savings, and if we're not able to get those, then there's some contingency in for that. It's also, we're reserving it for staff contingencies. This year, because we did have a decline in secondary enrollment, and we did not RIF teachers, there may be a small amount of surplus teachers that we'll have to use those funds for. And then we're preparing, the fund balance also prepares us for the second year. I-728 funds were cut over 2 years, and that fund balance prepares us for that second year. And then it also prepares us for the continuing worsening of the economic conditions that we're hearing about. So I'm going to start talking on the general fund with the impact of the state budget cuts and how those affect revenues and expenditures specifically. So this is a chart you should be familiar with. This was the chart that Chip presented to the community and the board when we were discussing the impacts of the state cuts to our district. So I-728 was cut, the teacher lid day was cut, math and science professional development, transportation, health and pension changes were actually reduced, which gave us a net increase. So the total cut was 8.9, and then we anticipated being able to use $1 million of our new federal stimulus money to offset those cuts. So the net cut that we anticipated was $7.9 million. I'm going to tie this all into the actual revenue budget if you stay with me. So based on that $7.9 million, we went through, as Chip described, the community input process, and Chip provided his final recommendations to the board and to the public on May 4th, his final recommendations for budget reductions. And those recommendations were actually in 3 areas. There were $1.3 million in revenue adds, and then $4.9 million in expenditure cuts, and then $1.5 million use of federal dollars and carryover. So, and I'll go through each of these specific changes. So the total cut recommendation was $7,761,000. So it's almost 7.8, but it doesn't add up. So, okay. So first column is the same slide that was a couple slides ago. And what I did is I want to show you how that affects specifically 09-10 revenue and our revenue budget. So I-728, when we, that $8.1 million number is actually the 2-year number. So what affected 09-10 was a $7.4 million I-728 cut. Okay? Everything else is the same until you get to health and pension changes. When the state reduces the cost of health and pension or pension reductions, it's a net, that 0.4 number was a net. So they actually reduced our revenue by 1.4 million, and our expenditures also decline because we're not paying out as much in retirement costs by 1.8. So the net is 0.4, but the change specifically to revenue is a $1.4 million reduction. So we had total revenue reductions of $10 million in the 09-10 budget, plus we received new 2-year stimulus funds of $2.3 million in special ed and $0.5 in Title I. So the net is a $7.2 million reduction in revenues. Okay? I'll make sure I haven't left anything out. Okay. So then, as part of the budget cut process, we decided to increase fees and add in addition to those state revenue cuts, we added $1.3 million in fees. And that was made up of $700,000 in all-day kindergarten, $650,000 in athletic participation, $45,000 in pull-out quest transportation, $50,000 in P-card rebates, and a reduction of $127,000 in revenues due to the community swim program being contracted to an outside agency. So net change in revenues is 1.3. So now this chart has 3 columns of numbers. The first column is the state cuts that and this is broken out by major state revenue categories. So the first column shows the state cuts that of $7.2 million, the district cuts of 1.3, and then the final column is the total budget impacts and resulting final budget. And then I will explain the differences. So state general apportionment is our regular basic ed apportionment, and that's driven by our enrollment and which drives staffing, and then state funded salary and benefits and staff mix factor. So the state cut $1.9 million, which was the lid day, the health and pension changes, and then a small amount of the CTE equipment money. So that's where the 1.9 is made up of. Our final district difference between 0809 and 0910 was $1.8 million, and the difference is we had our enrollment increased, but we also had lower contingencies on the revenue side. We have contingencies for our staff mix, and those change every year, and so it ended up being a $1.8 million reduction. The next section, state categorical, and state categorical in 0809 included I-728 funds. It also includes transportation, includes state grants like the math and science money, includes the TAP program, it includes special education. So $8.1 million in state cuts, the majority of that, of course, is I-728, and then the math and science money and the TAP grant make up that $8.1 million. The final budget was $9.8 million reduction in the categorical program. And what the state did, I'll talk about I-728 first. Our I-728 budget was about $10.5 million. The state cut 7.4. It left $3 million in I-728. It's no longer, though, funded from the state. It's funded, the state for 0910 is funding the remaining I-728 money with federal fiscal stabilization money. So the I-728 money is now federal money. So you'll see that increase, you'll see a decrease in state categorical, and an increase in federal dollars. So overall, the 9.8 is made up of the full I-728 cut of $10.4 million, transportation cuts from the state plus some enrollment changes in transportation, $400,000 of math and science money, the TAP grant, special ed changes. We had a couple of things in special ed. We had increases. We had enrollment increases reflected for 0809 in special ed. And so the budget represents those enrollment increases in 0809 in special ed and continuing to budget that. We're also budgeting safety net, state safety net money. We apply every year. Our special education department works very hard and applies for state safety net money for high-cost students. And it's fluctuated over the years how much money we've received. We've never actually budgeted those revenues or those expenditures before, and this year we decided we've been consistent in getting. We received $1 million last year. We're receiving about $1.7 million this year. The year before that, I think it was a little less, maybe $700,000. So we decided to go ahead and budget $1 million in safety net revenues and expenditures, and half of that is in state categorical and the other half of that is in federal dollars because that's how the state gives it to us. So I'll talk more about that later, but that's the reason for the change in the state categorical. And then we had some smaller changes. National board enrollment continues to go up, and ELL enrollment was budgeted to increase. So total state categorical impacts of $9.8 million in reductions, mainly due to I-728. Okay, everybody ready to move on? The federal line, again, the federal dollars are federal special ed, Title I money, all our ESAEA money, Title II, and Title I, as I mentioned. So $2.8 million was the planned state increase, of which 2.2 was federal stimulus money, and 500,000 was Title I federal stimulus. The actual increase in our budget was $7.1 million, and that was due to Our regular IDA, just very late in the year, I think at the end of May, our regular IDA federal dollars went up $300,000, our allocation increased, and our regular Title I allocation increased by about $120,000. And then in addition, we had the federal stimulus money of $2.5 million, the federal stimulus money of $500,000, and then this includes, the main reason this is increasing from 2.8 to 7.1 is the $3 million in I-728. So, and then the safety net that I mentioned earlier. So total changes of 7.8. The levy difference between 0809 and 0910 budget is $2.1 million in additional revenues, and that's our plan. That was our planned levy collection, 50% of 2009 and 50% of 2010. The other category, which is our transfer from Capital Projects Fund, that went up. Last year was the first year we budgeted that, and it was a guesstimate of how much we needed, and so the budget reflects actual. And then the last category is fees and local funds. And the district, as I mentioned earlier, had a 1.3 add to fees, and the final budget was actually a 1.4 increase, and the main changes were due to all-day kindergarten enrollment, and then we had decreases in interest earnings, and just changes in grants and revenue neutral programs, and increases in building use fees is the main difference between the 1.3 and the 1.4. So net altogether, the final budget compared to 0809 is a change of $220,000 decline. Okay.
So the levy amount is assuming we'll still be able to collect that?
Yes, and that's the maximum. That's the maximum that our voters have approved, and we anticipate being able to collect that because we're in the 4th year of our levy, and we're.
The declines as a result of 728 and 732 would not be reflected in this budget year. It'd be
Correct.
reflected in another
Oh,
year.
right.
They impact
Because the collection year
Yep.
is a year behind the budget year.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So now I'm going to move on to expenditures. So as a reminder, we had $4.9 million of expenditure cuts for our budget reduction process. So this chart summarizes by a major expenditure program where those cuts took place. So in regular education, which is our K-12, our basic ed classroom dollars, where we have our K-12 teachers and support staff such as librarians, counselors, building budgets, district level programs such as curriculum, staff development. We made $2.2 million in cuts, and I won't go through the dollar amounts of each of those cuts, but they were in the areas of stipends, advisory, elementary VP, secretarial staff, graduation support. Both building budgets and departmental budgets were reduced 5%, professional development and administrative reductions. I'm going to skip down to vocational education. That was reduced by its actual $63,000 due to the one-time equipment money that the state took away. The compensatory education program, that contains all the federal programs, Title I, Title II, Head Start, and categorical programs such as LAP, ELL, and used to contain I-728. Those were cut. In that program, we cut $900,000 of teacher leader, building professional development funds, the TAP program, some administration, and TOSAs were reduced. In the other instructional program, that includes summer school, all-day K, and other grant programs. The math and science program was reduced, and teacher leaders were reduced. Community service, as I mentioned before, we reduced the pool program. We're contracting that out to an outside agency, and then there was a small reduction in administration there also. And then district-wide support was a reduction of $700,000, and that was reflected in 5% departmental reductions, our custodial reductions, utilities, the calendar, we eliminated the calendar, and then the technology staff reorganization. And the last line is transportation, and we cut that actually $160,000. We're making route changes. So the total district cuts of $4.9 million. So this slide again shows the district cuts and then the resulting changes to the final budget. So the first program, regular education, we cut $2.2 million in cuts, but the budget actually increased $3.1 million. And the reason for that is the majority of the expenditures in I-728 were moved, had to be moved because we only had $3 million left. So the rest of those expenditures, like K-1 class size funds, professional development, some remediation staff that we paid for out of I-728, those were moved to basic ed programs. So now the K-1 staff are paid out of the same budget as all the other K-12 staff. So it actually makes it a little easier for us. So the other changes were, so we had 3.5 in moves to regular education, and then we had increases due to enrollment, basically total adds of 5.3 less the cuts of 2.2 to get 3.1 in the final budget. The federal stimulus budget is $6 million, and I'll be describing that in detail a few slides from now. Again, that's new revenue, and then also moving some programs, not just from I-720, or moving dollars, not just from I-728, but from some other programs. Special education, there were no district cuts in that program, but the final budget increased by $800,000 due to enrollment increases, increased in the safety net budget, and then we moved money from special education to federal stimulus. That 50%, that $1 million, we actually moved $1.2 million to federal dollars. So it went up 1.9, and we moved 1.1 for a total of 0.8 difference. The vocational education program, the difference between the district cuts and the final budget of $400,000 is due to enrollment declines. So just like our secondary enrollment is declining, the CTE program is anticipating a decline from 840 students to 775 students. So that's reflected in the budget.
I noticed that in the report, and I would like to find out more about that later, if it's just a decline in students or if there's other impacts like increased graduation requirements or whatever.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next category is compensatory ed, and this is the category that contains the I-728 funds. And so as I explained earlier, those dollars, so we didn't cut many programs in compensatory ed, but we had to move them in the budget because the revenues were no longer there for us to code. The state no longer funds the revenues there. So we actually moved $10.4 million in I-728, and then we had increases in Title I and National Board and ELL enrollment. So all those net changes represent $9.9 million. The other instruction program is, again, changes the cuts that I mentioned, and then there was just slight changes in enrollment. We actually project in the budget reflects a decline in enrollment in all-day K, and that was based on our original registrations for kindergarten, for all-day kindergarten. But since that time, the demand has increased, and we're actually back to where we were the year before in all-day kindergarten classrooms. Nancy?
We increased the fees again
Yes.
because of the budget issues. And so again, I'd like to know how that's going to impact all-day kindergarten and when we can come down to
Yeah,
it.
I can give you specific numbers, but right now we are not seeing a significant impact because of those fee changes. We probably will have just as many classrooms as we had the year before, but we can get you specifics on that.
And do we still have more requests for it that we can fill?
Yes.
Is part of that question.
Yeah, and that's, as you know, it's driven a lot by facility availability.
Right. So if we're still, it would make sense that we're not seeing a decrease if we still can't meet the need anyway.
Yeah, and what will
Or
be
the
interesting,
perceived
and what
need.
we'll try and get some data on is whether or not the fee increase impacts particular parts of the district. And so we'll see if we can break it down by learning community, for example.
Yeah, we'll need that on the sports too.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then the other thing, a small change, we are going to be the fiscal agent for the Skills Center, and so there's a small budget amount for what we're calling WANIC. It's the old NEVAC program, and so we're budgeting, it's a revenue neutral, so what we get in is what we spend, so, but we're just budgeting those dollars.
Is NEVAC going away with this new program?
No, WANIC is
Okay.
the umbrella organization, and NEVAC is a subsidiary of it, and the Skills Center is as well. So
So the NEVAC part will still be there, we're just adding, I thought. Maybe this is another
So
more information.
There's a differentiation between a NEVAC course and a Skills Center course. The Skills Center course has additional hour requirements, and also we receive a super FTE, so additional
Right.
funding associated with it. But we will also have NEVAC classes as well, and they'll be coordinated under the same office.
Okay.
And we are the
That's
fiscal.
right. Okay.
And we're the
That's
fiscal
what I
agent
thought.
for it. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. Community services, the budget actually changed by $200,000. We had a decline for the community swim program, but we had increases in reimbursables, and those are usually revenue neutral programs. District-wide support, which is where the business office, support services, facilities comes out of. The budget actually declined less than the budget cuts due to increases in election costs. This is our every 4-year levy election plus some board elections, and then we had increases in our overall insurance costs. And then transportation declined by $200,000 due to route changes. So the overall district reduction was $1.2 million. From last year's expenditure budget.
Which is almost unprecedented. I can't think of a time when we've actually decreased as opposed to increased just based on cost of living and other factors.
Correct. Okay, one more area I want to talk about is the use of the federal dollars and the carryover. So as part of our budget reduction process, in order to get to the $7.8 million in reductions, we had 1.5 planned uses of the federal dollars. So what our original plan was to use federal stimulus for the preschool funding that originally was paid for out of I-728, and then $400,000 for Lid Day, and we're going to use federal stimulus IDEA, and then the summer literacy program of $205,000. The plan was to use I-728 carryover to fund this program. So, and in the final budget, when we were looking at preschool, what we first decided to do was use ongoing existing federal funds before we went to the stimulus dollars. So, I mentioned earlier that our federal IDEA, our regular federal IDEA, increased by $300,000. So we did not, budget new expenditures. What we did instead was fund preschool out of that new money. 60% of the preschool students are special ed students, and so it makes sense to use some of the federal special ed dollars to pay for that program, a portion of that program. And then we also had the regular Title I program. We've been, the last couple years, we've had about approximately $400,000 where our Title I program increased, but each year we said it's going to go away. It's a very short-term, one-time money. And so, and we expected that money to go away this year, but we continue to have it. We expect it will go away next year, but hopefully we'll have it also. So we used $400,000 of one-time money to pay for the preschool program in regular Title I, and then we're using the federal stimulus Title I to pay for the remaining preschool dollars that used to be funded out of I-728. So, and the lid day dollar amount went up. It's just a rounding issue, but it's 0.5 now. And this, as we said, the summer literacy we're paying for out of I-728. So there is still $200,000 charged to the old I-728 code. The carryover you can keep in that state categorical money, but the new I-728 money has to go in the federal stimulus. So that's how we dealt with the expenditure transfers. And here's how we're using the $6 million in federal stimulus funds. Federal Title I, we received $500,000, and we're using that in .3 for new spending for materials and training, and .2 for the preschool transfer that I mentioned. The Federal Stabilization Fund, the $3 million for the student achievement funds, again, that was the state used to, was state categorical. Now they're funding that out of fiscal stabilization, so that's new federal dollars. That is a one-year funding. So we anticipate the state, in order to continue funding that $3 million, which actually will be 2.3 next year because of the $700,000 reduction, in order to fund that in 10-11, they have to fund that now out of state funding. So it's a one-time federal dollar funding source, and then next in 10-11, they've got to find state money to fund it. So, and just as an aside, because you'll see this on your board reports for this year coming up, the fiscal stabilization money also is affecting us in 2008-09. OSPI and the state, unfortunately, was not able to use, they had to use the fiscal stabilization money that they received from the feds in 08-09, and partly in 08-09. The only way they could do that was they decided to give us $10 million of federal money in 08-09 and take away $10 million in state apportionment. So we have to do an accounting entry in 08-09 to move money out of basic into federal. It's a fund. It doesn't affect our fund balance, but it is an accounting entry that you will see on your financial reports as increases in federal dollars, decreases in state revenue, and so that's been really fun to deal with also. So, but I did want to just add that.
One fun thing.
So, okay, federal IDEA special ed is a $2.5 million revenue budget, and we're spending that on 0.5 of that is spent on the lid day, 1 day of special ed training for all staff, teachers, and 1.2 million was the 50% of local funds that we were able to supplant, so to speak, of federal dollars. We moved that from Program 21, and then 0.8 in new spending for curriculum and training. So overall, out of the $6 million, we received 1.1 million in new spending, and the rest of the stimulus basically preserved jobs and programs. Okay. How's everybody doing? All right. I'm going to just cover the final enrollment, the impacts to revenues and expenditures, enrollment, and then I'll summarize revenues and expenditures, and I'm almost done. This chart shows our changes in enrollment. As you can see in the 0809 budget, we budgeted 22,081 students. We were actually at 22,350 this year, so we saw an increase of 269 students. In the 0910 budget, though, we're projecting a small decline of 58 students. And then we're up in elementary and down in secondary. The last column shows the difference between 0809 budget and 0910 budget. So budget to budget, we've had to, expenditures and revenues are higher because of the enrollment change budget to budget.
But, okay, so that's basically 2 FTEs when it comes to teachers.
It's actually
58?
8.
A lot of teachers would like to get that kind of stuff.
Well,
No,
yeah,
I'm not dealing with, I'm dealing with the 58, Doug.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that's basically 2 FTEs in teachers that we wouldn't be budgeting for.
That's actual. The 58 is the difference between where we were this year and where we are budgeting next year. The budget actually reflects a 211 student increase if you compare 0809 budget to 0910 budget. So all those comparisons that I'm doing are from budget to budget.
It's a net gain.
The thing is, I shouldn't really try and understand this so carefully.
Yeah. The 58 is 2 teachers, though. You're correct about that.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of the, and I know we won't really know until the whites of the eyes show up. I'm just trying to estimate where we might be when it comes to number of teachers.
And as I mentioned earlier, as Chip was talking about enrollment, our elementary enrollment the budget is based on projections, and then the secondary enrollment was based on actual registrations. The good news is we are right now, based on actual registrations in elementary, we're up about 100 students. So we're up above our 0910 budget that hasn't even been adopted yet. We're up a little bit in enrollment. So that's the good news. Secondary has not changed at all, but elementary's up slightly. So just hope that holds for the fall.
Well, yeah, because the history for the last few years is you all have been really very right on and a little bit to our benefit when the actual kids are showing up. I think we're all just curious as to what the economy is going to do to our enrollment.
Right. And sometimes we do better in a bad economy because we gain enrollment from private schools. So,
Yeah.
Chris.
I'm curious on the elementary side. It looks like we're projecting 3% growth. Does this put more pressure on configuration, and do we expect this trend to continue?
Yeah, yes, it does, and I'm going to say not more pressure. We in our out numbers, we were making some assumptions around growth. So if you look at our out numbers that we talked about the last time we had the configuration, these numbers are built into those assumptions. So keeping in mind, once again, if we assume all-day kindergarten, assume our growth projections, if we don't reconfigure, we'll need 7 elementary schools. If we do reconfigure, we'll need 3. And those are built into our assumptions.
Okay. The reason I ask is some of our elementary schools seem to be at the gills already.
Yes.
And it's not at the end of the district where we're supposed to be adding schools.
Yeah, so if our projections actually come to fruition, we know that we're going to need to be doing some both boundary adjustments and building simultaneously.
Okay.
Another thing about the enrollment, it kind of maps to the percent increase or decrease in elementary, junior high, and senior high, but it's a bit different. Like high school or senior high, we drop by 1%, but the enrollment, but the dollars is going down by almost 4%. Is there interesting reason for the discrepancy, or?
The three, are you talking about the 350,000?
No, I'm looking at this other budget document here, the draft 2009-10 budget, detailed budget information by fund.
Right, what specific number are you looking at?
Page 6, 0118 senior high education is down by 3.73%, which is more than the
Right.
1% drop in enrollment.
Those are due to budget cuts in that program.
Okay, so in general, the discrepancies are, okay, and so elementary, actually grows faster than the enrollment.
And again, the elementary is up 5%, but that's due to moving all those K-1 teachers from I-728 to, so it's not all related to enrollment.
Okay.
So all these numbers are due to budget cuts.
Yeah, and even in an environment where if we weren't budget cutting, but we were experiencing enrollment growth, we don't necessarily always align the enrollment growth to the place where the enrollment is growing. So you'll see some incremental increases, but for example, we may decide as a result of the delta revenue gains in the district that we may apply it to all-day kindergarten, for example, even though the growth is happening out of our secondary schools. So there's a process we use in order to assign where those additional revenue dollars go based upon program priorities, not necessarily based upon just where those kids are showing up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, this slide is showing the revenue change difference between 09-10 and 08-09, and I believe I've explained each of these categories, so I'll just quickly, state apportionment is 117.6. It changed 1.5%, and that's mainly due to health and pension changes and mixed factor contingencies. State categorical, that's where our I-728 money is. That's why that declined by 31%. Federal revenues increased 60%, 18 million. That's again due to the stimulus money and the I-728 change. Levy funds are up 5.5%. The other program is the capital projects transfer. And that is an increase due to, based on actual, last year was our first year budgeting that. And our fee programs are up 10%, and that is due to enrollment and then the fee increases that we talked about earlier. So we have a total revenue budget of $217.5 million with a drop of 0.1% from the prior year. And I brought this slide back. I took it out of the presentation last year, but this was a good year to bring this back because it shows the reduction in the state commitment to education due to really the cuts in I-728 and the increased demands on the local levy and fees, and then also, of course, the federal funds.
But that federal is stimulus, so it's really
That's
only
correct.
a short term.
That's correct.
Sorry, what's the other?
The other is the transfer from capital projects, so that went up due to when you'll see how it went from a very small number in 07-08 to 08-09, and then we knew that was our first year budgeting it, and now it's based on actuals, a better estimate of what we believe it to be.
Okay.
So.
And the fees really don't, considering the fees that we're increasing, it's not even a 1% increase.
Well, that's because we collect a lot of fees for a lot of things that weren't increased to the magnitude that you saw in athletic fees and all that. Those were some very specific fees. We collect a lot of fees for a lot of things.
Well, we do, and they go up with the cost of living increase.
Sure.
Right.
But the two big areas would be the sports and would you consider the all-day kindergarten a big area, or
Yes.
is that just relative?
No,
That's a big area.
That's a big area.
I think this slide is a good one to share with the gentleman that
Absolutely.
were here and lady that were here today.
Yep.
As a reminder.
It's all
Anything
gone
else that
home.
we have to share with them, I think this is it.
But it's
Is that me again?
a huge perspective.
Oh, okay, I didn't do it.
And it would, without that federal stimulus, we'd be even so much worse off, as Barbara pointed out.
Okay. And
She wouldn't have had as much fun, though. Sorry.
yeah. Okay, this slide is our program summary, expenditures by program summary, and just showing the changes from 0910 to 0809. Regular education, where all of our K-1 teacher staff or K-12 teacher staffing is, support staff, increased 2.4%. And that was mainly due to transfers from I-728 and some enrollment increases. Federal stimulus money, $6 million. Special education went up 3.8%. Vocational education declined due to enrollment. Compensatory ed, that was where our I-728 money used to be. All of our state categorical funds declined 60% to $6.6 million. Our other instructional programs, summer school, all-day K, and grants declined 6.8%. Primarily, that was the state math and science money. Community services, that was where the swimming pool, community swim program, and then our district-wide support of $23.7 million, and food services and transportation, a small decline of to 14.2. So our total expenditure budget is $216.7 million, or a $1.2 million decline from last year, and a 0.6% decline. Okay, so I wanted to talk about unknowns for next year. The federal stimulus IDEA money, the timing to receive and spend those funds is still up in the air. We've budgeted, we're getting that money over 2 years, $2.5 million each year over 2 years, and that's how we've budgeted the revenues and the expenditures. We may receive the second year early. And if so, the 50%, that supplant rule may allow us to charge more local dollars in 0910. So if that happens, it will allow us to charge more local dollars, and that will impact our fund balance by a one-time amount. It would reduce or increase our fund balance 1 year and reduce it back in 10-11. So again, that's an unknown. It wouldn't affect our budget capacity. Our safety net, special ed safety net funding that I mentioned to you, that we've been receiving every year, haven't budgeted for it. This is the year I said we need to get that in the budget and reflect more accurately our revenue and expenditures. Well, if we get that federal stimulus money all in 1 year, it may make us ineligible for safety net funding. So we potentially could lose $1 million to, or more of funding. So OSPI is currently reviewing their safety net rules to see if there's anything they can do about that unintended consequences. But, it's crazy.
Do our federal legislators also know this? Does the Department of Ed know this?
I believe, I don't know who's been communicating that information. Hopefully OSPI has been working with them. The state safety net rules are the state rules, so we are encouraging them to change their rules so that it does not have a consequence to us.
But with the IDEA and the supplant rules, that sounds like it's a federal issue.
It's actually how the safety net application, we have to apply and we have to show them that we are spending more money than we are getting in both state funding and federal funding. And we'll have to show on that worksheet that we do 100% of those federal dollars, even if we won't spend them this year or in 0910. And that potentially could make us ineligible if they don't change the rules.
We have had significant frustration over the state special education department for a number of years and have to continue to pay a lot of attention to it. So that's where we're pressing right now at the state level, because this is a state issue, not a federal issue. And we had one other issue that was a state issue as well, around the number of districts that were going to be qualified for the 50% supplant, And after working very hard with the state and with our coalition, we got those rules changed so that originally it was about 100 districts were going to qualify, and now in excess of 210 districts are going to qualify. We were out, and now we're in. So we're continuing to press on these issues.
Okay, so this really is just a state issue, because what I thought I heard first was that it's also an issue in how the feds are putting out the money.
No, it is a state issue in how the state deals
with how they put
how they're
out
putting
the money.
out the money.
Okay.
Correct.
Oh, so that's even worse. We might have gotten the feds to listen.
Okay. So a few unknowns beyond 0910. It was nice to have the legislators here because they, you heard from them first about the things I'm going to be talking about. They mentioned the state economy. They mentioned that the June forecast was down. The March and April revenues were below projections. The June forecast was not looking good. And if the September forecast continues to be down, they will be called back in September. We could probably expect further cuts in 10-11 if things are not, if the economy does not recover. And really what's left to cut is I-728, lid days, the K4 ratio, some of those things that they had put on the table this year. OSPI is already preparing for mid-year 0910 agency cuts. Anyway, that's a concern. Senator Rodney Tom talked about the COLAs and the COLA catch-up provision. The legislature did pass a bill to require a catch-up of the lost 4.2% COLA. The impact to the district would be another $1.4 million in local costs if we're required to catch that up, in addition to the local costs and the COLA that comes back potentially in 11-12. The levy lid.
Barbara, do that one
Yeah.
again, because I think this is the one that folks forget to hear, is that because we are required to do COLA beyond what we get from the
Right,
state, so that
because we
comes out
have-
of
right,
the levy dollars.
we have
So
more staff
what you're
than the
saying
state
is
fund.
to catch up as if the COLA had existed
Right.
for the 2 years that it's been suspended.
They passed a bill to say they were going to catch up over 4 years.
Okay.
So in order to do that, that's going to cost, in addition to the COLA that will go back into
Right.
place, which they're expecting to be anywhere from 2 to 4%, then this catch-up provision will be another 4.2% over 4 years, which will cost us another $1.4 million.
And that's 4.2% for the 2009-2010 year, and it's undetermined for 10-11 because there's a catch-up provision for both years in the biennium, correct?
Yeah, the catch-up, the COLA, though, for 0910 was 4.2%,
Right.
and for 10-11, it was actually a negative number. So the catch-up for the 2 years is actually around 4.2%.
And could you remind us so how much per percentage of COLA do we need to make up in local effort?
It's for every percentage, it's about $300,000 to $400,000.
Thank you.
Okay. The levy lid, again, as Senator Rodney Tom talked about, was they're going to come back in the fall for a special session to deal with, upping the levy lid to deal with the lost state revenue. They also talked about that 4% bump up. This COLA catch-up, will come into play. So the levy, the amount that we send to voters in February for the levy is going to be difficult to predict. So we're going to have to build in some contingencies adequate contingencies in our levy in February.
When will we have to make those determinations to put the levy on the ballot in February?
I believe the final...
December.
December.
No, we actually have it on the calendar hopefully for October.
I don't think we'll make it.
It's
Drop dead. It's December.
Yeah, drop dead.
We're
To
shooting
have
for
it
October.
filed is December, and Rodney Tom was talking about a conversation that we had last week around the October work that they're going to do around getting a bill in play that will not only protect our base but also potentially increase our base. And we urge them to not wait until the session in January because it would be too late for districts like ours and a number of East Side districts, which is why they're going to get it into play in October. So we will likely need to not set an amount until after that October session takes place.
It just affects our calendar even more.
They're planning in a one-day session in October to raise the levy lid?
Yes. That's what he said tonight.
It means they've got to have their ducks in a row before they
It
get
will
in
be,
the session.
if indeed they take it to and do that session, it'll be done before it gets in.
I understand that.
So,
Like I said, we need to have another discussion about this, not now.
the other issue has affected our budget. You notice that we actually benefited from the state reduced, in order to save money, the state reduced the pension contribution rates. So, but in order to keep the pension solvent in 2 years, they're going to need to bump up those pension rates, and they're predicting that they're going to need to bump it up 6% each year in the 11-13 biennium. They cut it about 2%. And so they've got to bump it up 6% each year. An increase of 6% is another 1.1 in local costs each year. So.
Just good. Goodbye, 4%.
The federal stimulus money, as you know, is expected to go away in 2 years, so additional cuts are going to need to be made if the state does not replace that. Enrollment, as Chip discussed, our projections anticipate, the good news is our projections anticipate 0.5% to 1.5% enrollment growth after 2010-11. Fixed costs, we need, as always, we need to continue to watch utilities and fuel to see how that's going to affect our future budgets. And the commitment is our 5% fund balance will be maintained. And the last slide, very quickly, just shows the long-term projections and how once this assumes the federal stimulus goes away and in 11-12, and so the current trend is expenditures will become greater than revenues, and therefore we're going to need to make future cuts if the state is not able to come up with more money. So this does conclude my presentation. I apologize for its length, but I think given this complex budget, we needed to go through that. And remember, the final budget adoption will occur August 10th. And the public can request copies of any documents or email, and Catherine's going to get feedback on the website. So.
And they also, if they would like, public can email individual board members. So, any other questions for Barbara? And Barbara, before they ask more comments, thank you very much to you, your department, to Janine, all of you. I know since this information came out in the fall and the economy went south, you all have spent tons and tons of time dealing with trying to get budget, the community input, putting these documents together, and it is not a simple issue. So thank you all, and thank your staff, please.
Thanks.
Chris?
So eyeballing the future projections, in the absence of additional federal stimulus and in the absence of the legislature putting money back in, we're talking about another $5 million that would mean to be cut 2 years from now.
Well, we're actually, $6 million. I mean, the I-728, that
That'll be
assumes,
fun.
$6 million in 2 years. Assuming they can't replace the I-728 money either. Plus the COLA, plus the pension.
But so our net deficit is running around $6 million total in a couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah, once those revenues are removed.
Great fun.
Classrooms next time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I have a couple easy ones for you, I think. On page 6, I'm looking at the general fund program expenditures. So like the building budgets are going up by 6.36. I thought they were going to go down.
Part of that is, let me get my notes here. A little bit of it is enrollment increases from budget to budget, but the majority is we have revenue offsets. In the building budget are all the deposits that schools make and a portion of the building use fees, and so we increased revenues and increased expenditures to reflect those offsetting deposits.
But the reality is that in terms of the district allocation,
There's
is
a
a 5%
5%
building budget reduction across the board for next year.
Right, that's
Right.
what I
Yes,
saw.
that's correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I had assumed.
Mhm.
When I saw the number, I was just like,
What we tried to do is get revenues and, revenues in line with what they're actually collecting in donations and deposits each year.
There's the budget speak, and then there's the man on the street speak. So
Remember all those dollars I said that are less than $1,000 from PTSA that might be donated to the schoolhouse? I think that's what she's talking about, goes in the building budget.
you know, one of the things I noticed reading through this was that the vast disparity in ASB balances. Is that typical for the different schools? I mean, are they just all over the board in when and how they're spending their ASB funds?
Yeah. From year to year, it varies, but we do have some schools with lower balances due to their ability to fundraise and their population. So
I think the answer is yes, that is typical.
I'm trying to find where it was. I've lost it now.
And the other place where you'll see variations in balances is also in their building budget balances that they carry from year to year. And that often is leadership dependent, so it depends upon the building principal, it depends upon what kind of needs they have in a given year. So yes, I do think that what you're seeing there is typical.
And Nancy, I'll just point out one of the figures you may be noticing is Rose Hill Junior has a beginning fund balance of 0 in their budget, actually. And the fundraiser, the main fundraiser that Rose Hill Junior had occurred the week after Jay Ellis's death. And so the fundraiser, due to attention elsewhere, was basically did not earn the money that they were expecting. Now, other things went into that, but that's an example of a one-year issue at a school that they're working to correct. But that's why, their beginning fund balance reflects that.
Well, even when you look at expenditures and revenues, some of it makes some sense to me, but some of it, based on numbers or location, some of it just seemed out of whack. So I was kind of curious how much we can, how much guidelines there are on what they can and can't do. I mean, it seems like it's pretty open.
Well, it's for ASBs and fundraisers, it is open and the same with PTSAs. I mean, that's
right.
Yes, you're right, and there is disparity. Chris.
So early on you had mentioned the $4.7 million transfer coming from the capital funds, and that's through a loophole that the legislature opened for us, or is it not?
I wouldn't call it a loophole. No. It's actually a change in practice. Okay. So essentially last year we had been charging for some time, for example, technology training. As part of our technology program, we were charging it to the capital fund directly, as allowed under the legislature. As we began asking questions about what we can and can't do, there was some legislative action that said we are not comfortable charging technology training, as an example, directly to the capital fund, but rather you can transfer the capital dollars to the general fund and spend it out of the general fund because it is a general fund expense, but it is appropriate to move those capital expenditures from one fund to the other. So it was not a loophole, but rather a change in practice, which was legislatively negotiated between what the legislature wanted to accomplish and what the accounting offices were comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's why and so you'll see a more of a consistent number, but that change in practice caused that number to change for us.
There was no impact because it was revenues
there was no net.
Out of the expenditures, and it actually increases our 5% fund balance requirement, so to speak. I mean, because it's included in the revenue number in the general fund. So
in terms of our local levies, when we pass the levy in February, that's going to be a combined M&O, tech, levy? Or?
No, we typically do the maintenance and operations levy, and then we do a separate capital projects levy, which includes short-term capital projects like fixing a roof, fixing those kinds of things, and technology. So that's a combined levy typically. And then if we choose to do a bond or not, that would be yet a separate issue as well.
And those will all be on in February together?
The board needs to decide that.
Okay.
The M&O and the capital projects are, I think, mostly givens because they are so embedded now into our systems. The amounts, of course, the board needs to think about and decide. The bond, I think we have quite a bit of discussion yet to be had before we decide whether or not we'll do a bond.
Okay. And a last question on the forecasts. Sorry, I just can't
Chris,
get away
I'm
from
having
this.
difficulty hearing you.
Oh, sorry. A last question on the forecasts. This $6 million hole that is going to keep me up at night. Is that including cost of living adjustments, or is that assuming that, I mean, if the economy fails to come back, if they fail to give us more money, one might be able to make the assumption that we might have the same sort of negative COLA equation?
Yeah, right now my budget is based on the COLA coming back in 2011-12, and I think it's a 2.9% COLA right now. Every quarter, when they update the revenue forecast, they actually update the COLA projections.
Okay.
So I will be updating,
All right.
twice a year what those future COLAs will be.
And so that.
But you're right, that could change.
Right, and that's a major piece of this gap.
Yeah, bringing back the COLA and the local funded.
Yeah, and again, if you think about it this way, so you've got 4% in 9-10 that is makeup, and then a 2%, so you've got 6% total at about $400,000 per percentage. So of the 6, you got about $2.4 million in COLA provision. So you still have close to $4 million in other provisions that need to be made up. So that gives you a sense of where those numbers come from.
And this budget also just assumes an average 2% retirement rate increase. So if those start jumping up the way they need to be, then that makes this even worse.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you again. We have 3 more items under non-consent. And so does anybody want a short break to get a drink, use the restroom, and run right back?
Fine.
Within 5 minutes? Take a quick 5-minute break.
I don't need it, but I'll.
Robbie nodded his head. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. To be excused for the rest of the meeting, so we will proceed with the rest of our. Whoa! Thank you. We'll proceed now. I never have to use this thing. Wow. Non-consent agenda items.
Thanks, Jackie. We are on tab 9, which is policy regulations regarding graduation requirements. As you know, the State Board of Education revised the high school graduation requirements this year, requiring a 3rd credit in mathematics, which provides a mathematics pathway of Algebra 1 geometry and Algebra 2 for all students. Currently, our graduation requirements for that 3rd credit give students an option of math or science for that 3rd credit, and in this instance, we're suggesting the change of our graduation requirements in order to align with the new state requirement, again, of algebra, geometry, and Algebra 2. It is for those students that do want to have admission into college. Colleges do expect students to achieve through pre-calculus and or have a rigorous mathematics course in their senior year. So that's just an FYI. Other changes to the graduation requirements. One is to restrict the number of credits that we will allow from outside agencies. We're seeing a continuing trend of students taking classes from outside agencies that were of questionable credibility and then transferring those into the system. And so we're now limiting the number of courses that students can do that with. And then lastly, we added the requirement that schools clearly identify which courses they are offering which do meet the college academic distribution requirements. And that's a set of standards that's now required by the HEC board and controlled by the state board, which identifies a course and whether or not it is admissible by a four-year institution, and students must take at least 3 CADR courses in any given academic year. So that's a summary of the changes that we're asking the board to consider for approval.
So
Before we discuss, I'll entertain a motion in a second.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion from Doug. Anybody want to second this?
A second.
Okay, Nancy, second. Now, discussion.
Okay, the document that we have is what you're proposing to implement, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I'm trying to see the changes on here without, quickly. The math is easy to see, but I'm trying to see the other changes you mentioned.
And I apologize, we did not provide you with a strike-through document. Again, I think I've summarized the 3, but I'm happy to provide a strike-through document for you. We do need to get this approved, however, if we're going to implement it for the class.
Can you just tell us quickly, the math one is obvious, but with the other 2, where quickly those are in the...
I found the one.
Okay, so Dan, do you know where in the document these are located?
Page 8 of 9, I know, is this one, last one he was just talking about, the 3 credits from outside institutions. Number 4 there at the top of the page. Isn't that the one you were talking about? Where they only allowed 3 of the...
Yes, you're looking at 8 of 9.
Yeah, 8 of 9 at the top. Number 4 is the one.
Yes, that's correct.
So is that all new? Is 4 all new?
Yes, 4 is all new.
Okay.
And the requirement that schools display cater in an obvious way is all new.
And where's that?
I'm going to find it here.
Below that?
It is on page 6 of 8 under courses of study and related sequences.
So number 2.
Number 2, B2.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy. We'll make sure that we do strike-throughs in future documents.
So in the new section 4, it doesn't really declare anything about seat time. It is leaving acceptance of, it's acceptance of external courses is at the judgment of the principal.
Yes.
And I think that's quite reasonable. I just wanted to be clear that it wasn't just about seat time.
No. As a matter of fact, we're finding more and more online courses being those kinds of courses which are not about seat time. They're often about competency. And there's some online courses which are quite rigorous and acceptable and others which are not.
Okay.
And so we're trying to be a bit more judicious about which courses we do and do not accept.
Do the students get pre-approval? I'm quickly reading here, but yes, pre-approved to be eligible.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess this is the one I have the most question on. I understand why we want to make sure that if they're bringing in outside classes, they meet certain criteria. I don't understand the limit of the 3 credits if they meet the criteria, so I'm confused.
So we had a conversation with Bellevue and had talked with our attorneys earlier about this, and one of the things they said is we need to make sure if we put a limit on this that we make it clear it is a district-wide limit that we're putting on and that we can't allow much flexibility in that. And so the reason we did is literally went to Bellevue and said, what do you do? And they said we limit it to 3.
One of the
and then there are some exceptions that can be made outside of that. But part of this was we can't have one building who has a practice of taking all credits and another building who has a practice of taking no credits, and so it begins to quantify that practice.
Which is what we have in place now. So we have some buildings who have established their own limitation on the number of credits they'll accept, which is different than other buildings. So we're standardizing practice across the district.
Well, I understand that, and I understand making sure that they meet requirements. I still don't understand why we limit the number of credits if they meet our criteria. I can understand standardizing it between buildings. So basically, if kids are getting some of our requirements through other means for whatever reason, because they dance with Pacific Northwest Ballet or they,
There are ways
do other things.
There are ways and exceptions. So if you dance with Pacific Ballet, there are ways to go back in and talk about reasons why you can't. There's also a way to get alternate experience credits that's spoken to in here, so you can actually bring them in another way.
Okay, so by doing this, we may be standardizing it, but we're not necessarily limiting options as long as they meet rigor.
I think what she's saying is why did you choose the number 3 as a limit?
Because we needed to have some method of showing that we have standardized the approval, so it's not arbitrary by building.
Why 3, not 5? I mean, that's, I think, where she's going.
Right, because honestly, we went and looked around and we did what Bellevue was doing.
Okay, I guess, I
They
still
must have a reason?
have some questions.
Does Bellevue have
about-
a reason around that? Same reason, they needed to limit it, and so
How often is this an issue with kids?
it is not a huge issue. It's not a frequent issue, but we're seeing more and more students who are stepping out and coming back quite quickly with credits.
I mean, that's what you mentioned at the work session, and so I understand that problem, but we also know that there's a lot of other options out there now for some of these courses.
Right. So we're not limiting if kids are doing online courses that are being offered inside our own system. This doesn't begin to limit that process in any way, shape, or form either. But it does limit the ability for kids to just step outside.
I guess I just feel uncomfortable voting on that particular provision without a lot more information. If I'm having to adopt this tonight.
So the important thing, and this is board purview, the important thing to adopt tonight is the math credit.
Right.
So certainly the board can modify the resolution to not accept that until further, or if it's a Nancy issue and not a whole board issue, then the board can adopt it, and Nancy, of course, can abstain from the vote. I'll speak to it for a moment. I have similar questions about, is that, on the one hand, is it creating a monopoly, if you will, by saying that kids have to take all their classes within our system when more and more options are becoming available, and yet on the other part of the problem is game playing that exists with kids, and when does a Lake Washington diploma no longer become a Lake Washington diploma, because you essentially have an unlimited amount of classes that kids can have. The problem that we're trying to solve right out of the chute is that we have some schools that have very restricted guidelines and other schools that have very liberal guidelines around this issue. So, and I think we're all in agreement as standard as possible. The question is, where should that standard be? One of our high schools right now has a limit of 2. Others don't have a limit. It's really just principal approval. So as Dan suggested, 3 was kind of a starting place. Should the number be 5? Should the number be 6? Should the number be 2? I think we could survey a number of places, and probably it's still a rather arbitrary standard. So that, I don't know that we're going to do more research and get a better number for you. We're going to find some systems that have a higher number, some systems that have a lower number. I do think it's probably important that we have a number, and I also think it's important that we monitor whether or not this particular policy is limiting kids from being successful. I mean, that's a really good question that we should be asking, and that's at the heart of the issue.
Right, and if we adopt this provision tonight, that impacts kids for the next...
Until we change it.
When does this go into effect?
It would go into effect starting this fall, so the
Fall.
incoming class, which would be the class of 2013. The reason why I think it's worthwhile to put this on is, number one, I do think a standard is reasonable, and also there are a number of provisions in there for exception. So there are, for example, it talks about this applying to classes that are available inside of our system. So, for example, if a student wants to take Latin, and we don't offer Latin, and they do a lot, that doesn't count towards the 3 because it says those classes which are inside of our system. So I think that there's enough exceptions to this that I feel comfortable with where it is today, and that we're going to learn some things. But again, the rest of the board needs to feel a level of comfort as well.
I guess, Chip, what I hear you saying is, we have to start somewhere, and without knowing, this is in an ideal world, we would have had this more consistency a long time ago. But I think we have to consider anyway your judgment and the staff's judgment as far as how best to proceed with this.
And knowing that there's not really a time. I mean, it's not like this policy sits for 5 years and you can't touch it any time between now and then.
Right, but kids are only in the system for a few years, so it does impact them. I'm thinking this applied when Amy took Spanish off campus.
So she could do that for up to 3 classes. So she took Spanish off campus. It is offered on campus. She would, of course, need to get it approved, and it would be okay. Now, if she took Spanish and algebra and history and government, well, suddenly that becomes a problem, and I think that that's a fair way to think about it.
But theoretically, I mean, she didn't do it for 4 credits, but theoretically, she could have done it for all 4 years of high school.
Depending upon the high school she went to. She couldn't have done that if she went to Eastlake.
Right, but she didn't go to Eastlake.
Right.
She went to Juanita.
Exactly our point.
Well, and right, so that's where the 3 gets me. It's not the quality. I agree with we need consistency. That's been a problem. I agree we need quality.
Right.
I worry about, the 3 if there are other instances where it may be appropriate.
So did she take it because she already had a full load and she couldn't fit it into her schedule?
She took it because she was learning Spanish quicker and better, continuing with the person she'd been learning Spanish from since she was in 4th grade. And Jane, who was a Spanish teacher, agreed.
Right. And once again, the question that I would have is, in that kind of instance, which is a totally appropriate reason for a student to do that, is it likely that they will have more than 3 reasons like that during their high school career?
Well, they don't know anymore. That's the thing.
Right. So, which is why I think that starting with 3 is a reasonable place to start, because, if you've got kids that are doing 4 and 5 and 6 credits, and they don't meet the criteria, so in other words, it is offered, so that's one set of criteria, and it isn't a scheduling problem, what is the likelihood that student is actually playing the game so that they can avoid the rigor that Lake Washington provides? Well, I think that's what we're trying to prevent as well.
I understand that. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know, and it doesn't sound like we really know, or maybe you do know, we just don't have it in front of us, how much it's being gained.
No, I don't think that we know exactly, but I think this is a good starting place, which is why I'm suggesting we adopt the policy, unless the board does not feel comfortable with that, which you can amend the motion.
Chris? We've heard from Doug.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, from 2 takes. One is I appreciate the notion that there's a value to a Lake Washington diploma. And at 3 credits out of a 24-credit high school experience, it's half a year that one could be taking somewhere else and getting credit for it. And it does have loopholes that allow us to have special experiences. That is, if you've got something where they need to take courses that are somewhere else. What is not concurrently enrolled, so if you've got a kid who goes abroad, that doesn't count as concurrent enrollment. You can get credit for that whole year that transfers back.
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. To that extent, I think I'm okay with 3 credits, except for my experience with my brother-in-law, where he needed to finish high school, and whether he got the GED or whatever, well, I guess he got it externally from the district. He didn't graduate from the district.
Right.
So I think I'm okay with it.
Yeah. And
I would like to know how many kids fit this.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to point out is that it is also important that we have alternatives for kids inside the system. So that means FLC, that means Best High School, that means online classes that we offer within our system.
Running Start.
So all of those things actually don't count against the 3 credit count if they're getting courses that we are actually hosting.
So my take on this is that I would like more information, but I am not so concerned that I'm not willing to take this as a first stab at it and revisit it next year.
I'm with Chris. I think I'd like to see how this plays out and get some information, but not that we shouldn't put it into play. But I think if we find that it's a problem, I think we need to know that. And make the adjustment. I mean, if we just determine that 4 is it, and it may be that for someone to continue a subject, they need all 4 years of it to take it once each year to get the 4 credits, that may be the number, but I don't know that today.
Okay. We'll bring you back data.
Okay, so but as long as we bring it back and evaluate it, I think, and kind of keep on it for, not just 1 year looking at it, I'm okay.
So we're going to revisit it in a year?
I think
with data?
We should.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I need to be clear about what data you'd like. Because I don't want to just say, let's revisit this in a year with data, and then I really don't know.
I think we need to know the numbers.
Number of kids that are taking
that are doing this, why they're doing it. I mean, it doesn't sound like there could be that many
Yeah,
kids.
the why I'm not concerned about. It's the numbers of how many would be affected.
Right.
How many are taking
I'm
3 or
happy
more?
to bring you kids who, how many kids are accumulating credit from outside the system. I mean, that's a piece of data. I don't know that I will be able to provide for you data on every kid as to why they're doing it.
Can you
But
provide us
we should know what they're doing.
subject? Yeah, exactly. What subject were they taking outside,
Sure.
and was it something they could have taken at our school?
So I think from this point forward, when this policy goes in, kids have to tell us that. Why are you doing this? And I think before that, it's going to be mostly speculation unless we actually go and hunt kids down and...
Well, I think just this amount of information is going to tell us something. I mean, principals have to approve this. Principals have a reason for approving it.
Right, I'm saying
Seems
we
to
will
me
be
they
getting
should be
that.
able to let us know the reasons. I mean, frankly, I thought Eastlake was way too restrictive on these sorts of things. I thought there should be more
The reason's
flexibility.
part of their presentation. Yeah, I'm with
I
Nancy. I mean,
agree.
if they fill all this in, the
Right, then
principal
we will be
has
able
to
to know.
have the data. I
Right.
understand we may not have it up to today,
That's what I'm saying.
but
It's
once it
going-
goes into place.
Yes, we
That's
can
right.
easily get that data once...
And it actually may not be a bad data point to have over time because of the shifts that you're talking about, of more and more online stuff that's available outside of our district. And what kind of impact will it have on our kids wanting to take them? And if we don't have something in place to deal with it, you could have somebody who does all 4 years elsewhere and expect a Lake Washington diploma because we haven't said that they can't do that.
Well, and I'm not quite sure if it's real specific in here, but there should be criteria for which these courses are approved by the principal. So, I mean, the example that you said that was a problem, if you knew the content and how well the student does in that. So if they go and take
They have
Algebra
content here.
1 off campus for some reason, and they come back with some certificate that says they've taken Algebra 1 off campus, Okay, if that's the only class, they fall into the 3 credits, but the question is, was it really truly an equivalent class?
Right. And it has to be pre-approved.
It does.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a form that does ask all those questions you just asked.
Because it
That
says
has to be
content
filled out.
outline and/or major learning. How are they going to be assessed? And the qualifications of the instructor. So that means the principal has some material in front of them before they can say yay or nay.
I would have assumed that they were already had
doing
some
it.
criteria,
One would
even
hope.
if some were doing it and some weren't.
But they haven't, which is what we're trying to fix.
So are you okay with that now?
If we come back to it in a year and assess it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any more comments, questions, needs? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And anybody opposed? All right.
Okay, the next item is under tab 10, the interlocal agreement with the City of Kirkland around our use of facilities. As you know, we have an interlocal agreement that really a partnership with the City of Kirkland around the use of our facilities. They provide maintenance and upkeep for a number of our grounds in exchange for priority use for some of our facilities. Over time, that priority use has spilled into the non-field use, which would include our gyms, and which caused us to need to look at our facility use agreement. Specifically, some of the questions that arose had to do with those schools that were in the PAA, or the non-incorporated parts of the city. And as you know, there's been quite a bit of controversy around that. This agreement is not perfect. The reality is that there is not enough indoor sports facility use in the community. And as a result of that, we needed to try and find some level of compromise between what we could provide in many of our youth organizations and what they are needing, and what the City of Kirkland is attempting to do with many of their city programs. So in the recommendation, you'll find that this agreement clarifies that the city's priority status applies to schools in the city and not in the proposed annexation area. So the level of priority that the City of Kirkland receives for our city school facilities does not apply in the PAA. Secondly, it provides clarification that the city may require building use for schools in the may request building use for schools in the PAA and be treated with equal priority to other youth recreation organizations. In other words, they don't receive super priority, but they don't receive lower priority either. So they are the same level, if you will, and that that priority status is mainly to support the city's youth recreation activities. While it does allow for adult activities, the priority is placed upon youth activities. What happens is we then receive those requests 4 times a year. When we receive those requests in the PAA area, the City of Kirkland requests are balanced with the other requests, and we distribute those schedules accordingly. We also have some language in there that essentially says that any given organization can't hoard the facility use, that there needs to be some level of distribution for the use. So this agreement is in place for your consideration.
Okay, before we discuss motion, anyone?
I'll move approval.
Doug has a motion. Chris or Nancy, you want to second it?
I don't know till I find out more from you. I didn't get a chance to call you.
Oh.
Should I?
You can second it. We can have discussion. Okay. Chris has seconded it. Okay. Actually, reading this, knowing, since I've probably my community has
You're
been...
not a point person on this.
Well, actually, some of our youth programs over in the Kamiakin and Finn Hill area have really been instigation for getting this and getting really the balance back in place for youth groups over adult groups and use of the buildings and, as you're saying, hoarding them and that kind of thing. So I think this addresses that really well. Obviously, I read this one with pretty close attention. I do have 2 questions for you. One, since annexation may be on the ballot come November, and if it then becomes the city, does it then, the PAA piece disappears and that then the schools in the current PAA would then be treated like those within the city? Is that correct?
Yeah, since Janine negotiated the majority of this with the city folks, I'm going to ask her to answer that question.
Yes, Jackie, that is what we've been talking about with the city, is that if all of the proposed annexation area goes, or the parts that do go, would then become treated like city schools, potentially the issue of the proposed annexation area then would go away. The city would then be doing more, potentially doing more investment as well. That's been an issue that we've had we've had some wonderful investments. Was it me?
No.
We've had some wonderful investments by the city in some of our facilities, so it's really improved the playability of the fields and the ability for the community to use them.
Turned everything on.
Yeah, I think you...
Go ahead.
Okay. We know that there would be potential interest, I think, if the city, those were in the city, that they may be, willing to look at extending some of the investments that they've made in other fields. Obviously, they're not going to invest in fields that are outside of their sort of current area. But yes, that has been what we've talked about, would be that it would extend.
Well, the 2 sticking points that I know of that were issues in the community, the first one was the fact that our booster clubs were treated as being really our youth and having in that first category of level. And I see that that's where they moved. They are part of, along with PTSA, it says school booster clubs,
yes,
et cetera. So they automatically become part of group 1 as consideration.
Correct. We did clarify that in the policy, yes.
Okay. And then really the big change then I see is that coming in, once the annexation were to take place, is that they just would have a priority of the next tier of being assigned, rather than getting into a queue with a bunch of others to get a piece of.
Correct. They would, in terms of priority, the way we're trying to do it is as you can see, we've tried to develop a timeline. Right now, we don't have a timeline, so it's very hard to say who has priority over who, because it can become first come, first serve, and so you're really not implementing a priority schedule. Right. We wanted to group all the requests together, have schools get them, and then they can actually make some decisions within the scope of a priority system. So that's the idea of the timeline. When they get those, the other things that we are clarifying within the procedures manual is that just because you have priority status doesn't mean that you have the ability to request everything that's left at that time. Right. We still have the ability to say, within all of the groups that we've got requesting, we may process their request first. It doesn't mean that they necessarily get to take 100% of the time, nor any other group who might be competing for time with a lower priority group.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we address that. And then I think the other big change would be this idea of kind of an annual review of adult use, and the district being able to say, yeah, that's reasonable in the context of what we've done in the past, in the context of the overall program. It's not just an automatic that the city's sort of youth organizations get passed on to their adult programs, but we also recognize that those adult programs really help pay for and fund some of the youth programs. Right. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship there, but also wanting to bring some knowledge that we want to look at that annually. We want to make sure that we're comfortable with the level that that's happening, so it doesn't kind of creep up, that adult programs become 50% of the time.
Sure.
And we would be able to sort of address that if we felt that was happening.
Well, the other issue was they no longer are in charge of scheduling within the building. Is that correct? That goes back to the building?
And actually,
because that was the big issue.
Yeah. They never, according to the agreement, they never really were in charge of scheduling in the building. When we did the last interlocal agreement, we conceptualized that in the future they would. They never actually developed the scheduling position to do that. However, it became a little convoluted at some schools where there was a feeling that that was happening, or the practice may have been that was more of what was happening. But this does clearly try and clarify roles and responsibilities of the city schedules outside fields, the district's responsible for gyms, and some other processes. The other piece that is mentioned here, but it also clarifies the reimbursement issues. Because as you know, the city's struggling with budget issues, so are we, and we're having to look at fees we're going to be charging for building use for all users. As you know, you implemented a fee, and so this kind of acknowledges that we may end up having to pay some more fees to the city for the use of Hartman Park, Peter Kirk Park with the lights and those kinds of things, but also recognizing that they accept responsibility to pay the fees that we would be charging any other users as well.
Okay. And our secretaries are aware of who's in charge of scheduling, and the parks doesn't own the time and gives it away.
We have done some work on updating the procedures with folks. We're looking at doing some additional training with the building use secretaries, because this is really, a lot of those changes are being implemented for the fall.
Okay.
So.
And the only other question I have is on page 16, there's kind of this Exhibit A that's blank, other than the title. Is that supposed to have something there?
Yes.
It says information to be
that?
submitted on the
I emailed
proposed
it to you.
annexation areas. And it's just a blank piece of paper. I know, that's been the whole problem.
We were sort of scrambling. That's a copy of the proposed annexation area. We did actually get it late today.
Okay.
So we have it, and we can provide that to you. I think we.
Well, tell me what it looks like.
We got it late, and I didn't.
Since this affects Nancy and I tremendously, what would have gone here?
A
Just to
map.
what the schools are? Oh, the map.
A map that shows what are the proposed annexation areas.
We know that well. Trust me.
Actually, do we really?
Yes, we do.
I
Yes,
don't
we
know.
do. Yeah, Wendy's nodding her head. She's from that area, too.
I'm
Okay.
really concerned about the fee section. You're comfortable then with the scheduling part, because that's
Yes,
where we've had
that was
huge
the
complaints.
big issue. And I know this year went better because the JVA folks have been quiet, so I'm assuming that's better.
My goal was that the kids groups had priority, but the idea that the city can charge rental fees for use of our property, I'm having a hard time getting my head around.
You want to tell me where you're looking at specifically?
I'm under Section 5, page 5, fees and charges. The city may charge rental fees to community users of district-owned facilities.
And that is in the existing agreement. That is for the fields, so it's for, it's the fees that it's really, maybe rental charge isn't the right amount, but it's the fees that they charge for use of the fields to help, I mean, a lot of this has to do with reimbursement of their costs. If you continue to read,
Okay.
it says that it will cover the actual cost of using the facilities and not result in a profit. So that's where they're looking at even fees for programs. So if they're offering youth basketball or something like that, they're charging a fee for people to participate in that. They're not subletting it, so rental fee may be a little bit of a misnomer there. But
So if they're using one of our fields, an outdoor field, are they charging fees because they're responsible for maintaining that field?
Well, actually, right now, the city of Kirkland doesn't use outdoor fields for any outdoor
sports, I don't think, unless they do soccer, because they don't do baseball. All baseball is done away from the city of Kirkland because of an agreement they have with Little League and Pony and all of them. So all those fees are done by each of those individual organizations to operate their own program, and I don't think they pay anything to the city because there really isn't a cost for the city to rent the outside. I think where the fees come are inside for basketball, for instance, but if it's a Parks Department basketball program, they charge a fee to those kids to participate in the program.
I understand that they would charge a fee. I don't understand why the city would charge a fee to community groups using our gyms.
Well, that's only if I think it's their community.
Yeah, that wouldn't be for our building use. The city does not schedule building use for us. So our policies prevail.
Yeah, and maybe how it's...
And maybe it's worded poorly.
Yeah.
I think the intent there is to say, if the city is, just like we are, if the city is experiencing costs associated with the rental of the facility, or even the fields, for example, if the city is lining the field, if the city is dragging the infield, some of those costs they have the ability to recoup for those costs. That's the concept that we're trying to get at.
But most of the time outside, they don't really do very
language
much.
cleaned up?
I'd suggest that if you just simply eliminate rental throughout the whole paragraph, the city may charge fees to community users if the district-owned athletic fields and facilities to cover administrative and maintenance costs the district or city may incur. The party's objective with respect to charging fees is that such fees will cover the actual cost of using the facilities and that fees will not result in a profit for the city.
Yeah.
I think if we just take out rental, it has a different set of implications to it.
And I think it would be, too, it's like indoors, if they were paying the energy fees or whatever, they might have to add a little bit to their fee that they're already charging the kids to participate to cover their then costs of having.
Yeah. So I would suggest that we just simply change that as part of your adoption of the policy, and we'll make sure that gets reflected in what goes to the
That
city.
only in A?
I read through the others, and that is only in A. The others.
There's nothing,
the other-
nothing else says rental.
D, hourly rental rates may charge
I think of each other.
I think that one should stay because the intent there is basically to say, we agree that
Of other
we will pay
facilities.
each other fees comparable to what the agency would charge others. So if in the future we determine that there is a rental fee, then they would be responsible for paying that fee. Right now, we don't have rental fees for Group 2 users.
But we do have other fees now for use of our facilities, I thought. All our energy surcharges.
And that's covered there, that we may charge each other rental, energy surcharge, supplies, utilities, and other expenses. All of those kinds of things are within the context of the fee structure that we just approved.
So you're proposing right now amending this agreement
Yes.
to strike rental?
Yes.
Do we have to get the city's okay on that?
The city hasn't actually approved it, so I think, their meeting isn't until the first part of July.
And they may not even notice
So
that.
I do not anticipate that will be a problem for them. It doesn't really change the context of what we
Do we need
meant.
to formally make a motion or
Yes,
anything?
to amend it, yes.
Yes.
I'll move that we strike rental from Section 5,
Page 5.
subsection A on page 5, in the two places where it's used.
3.
3?
Hey, can we make that a friendly amendment, or you want me to do this as a formal vote on
Since
the...
I made the motion, I accept that as a friendly motion.
Okay.
A
so
friendly amendment.
we can just do an approval rather than going through
As long as
approving
the
that and approving that.
seconder.
Is that okay with the seconder over there, Chris? To roll that into the amendment?
Here, let's just pass it.
Well, I appreciate all the time and effort. I know this has been a lot of work. It's been a lot of haggling with the city. It's not been an easy agreement to come together on both sides to make things right for the kids in this district, which is, I think what the start it is that the kids who live in the district should have first priority to using our facilities, and that wasn't happening, and that's why this had to be revisited.
And I think as Chip said, one of the challenges is there really isn't enough indoor space, and that's where we compete for limited resources. But I do want to say that the city folks were really very, good to work with, and I think we all have kind of the same interests at heart. is, making sure that kids have appropriate opportunities to do a wide range of activities, and so I think we have a similar interest in heart.
And I did talk with Chip earlier about when we have the custodial plan coming out down the road, if that might have an impact, but I don't know how it would inside the document. It may have impact in another way with fees or something else that is
And
addressed.
we're looking as we develop that plan to around the context of building use and making sure that we still have ways to offer that to our community.
I think, probably more than just critical. Okay, thank you again. I appreciate it. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting this with the elimination of the 3 rentals on page 5, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion is now passed, and now we're on to our EL.
So, Jackie, we have 3 ELs tonight under tab 11, 12, and 13. Under tab 11 is the treatment of parents and citizens, and all of the subsections under that EL, there are 5 of them, are in compliance, and so I'm just going to ask for the question at this point.
Wait, what question? Oh, ask us for questions,
Yeah, I
not
think-
the question.
Actually, I did mean the question.
We're not voting on it.
Yeah, we don't vote on,
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
We're just reading.
We don't
yeah.
vote on it.
First reading. Any
Yeah.
questions?
No.
I think the only thing I was just,
We just kind of do it by exception.
Some of the numbers that come in that are a little down on satisfaction surveys, but I think we need to see the next go-round to see how it
Yep.
goes, because they kind of
Yep.
up and down in the always column. And now with all the budget things, everybody's probably not happy and everybody's cranky. Okay.
The next one is under tab
too. Me too.
12,
Okay.
and this one is student learning environment. And we do have some partial compliance issues on this one, and it's specifically around encouragement, fail to assure that a climate is characterized by support and encouragement for high achievement. There were a couple of questions that Ravi brought up that he showed to me that I want to go ahead and just get out into the public. One was around the student perception data. He indicated that it was the same as last year, and that's correct. The student data has not been processed yet, so it didn't land in this. In the report? Okay, so we'll just go with. We'll make sure that you guys get updated
Okay.
numbers next week for the student perception data. The second question that Ravi asked was around, we had talked last year about a syllabus study, and had we done anything about that? Dan's team is still looking at a syllabus study. We've not implemented it yet, but it's still pretty high interest to us. We're trying to incorporate that within the context of the Vision 2020 work around challenge, and I believe that that's on the docket for next year. Is that accurate, Dan? Yeah, if you could speak at the mic, that would be great.
That process will connect up with that cater process of determining which courses are of rigor to be identified as meeting the entrance requirements.
Thank you. And then the third question that Ravi asked was around challenge, specifically in the middle range of our students. So he indicated that our AP data is impressive, and what about making sure that students are encouraging for high achievement in the middle range of students? And one of the reasons why this is in partial compliance is because we seem to be seeing a decline in perception data from the parents of secondary students around that encouragement of high achievement. And so I think probably the way that I'd like to address that specifically is our emphasis around challenge as the theme for work for next year as an institution. We've got a number of strategies on how we are going to approach that, and it's not an easy problem to fix, as you know. Sometimes kids being encouraged for high achievement is a perception issue. Student says, you're bored, why are you bored? Well, it could be because the level of rigor in their classroom is not adequate. It could be because they aren't feeling socially connected. It could feel that they don't feel cared about by their teacher. I mean, there's a number of reasons. So there's 6 specific strategies that we're looking at to ensure rigor and relevance inside of the system. One is changes to the PGE system to assure that we've got a good evaluation criteria. Second is self-studies, where we're actually having each school look inside their school and begin asking themselves, are we challenging students? Do we have a meaningful and rigorous curriculum? Do we have high-quality teaching take place? Because the two are connected. Third is a redevelopment of the professional development system, which includes some work through PD 360, which we look at classroom vignettes of what a challenging classroom looks like. And the second portion of the PD redesign is around coaching resources. A fourth strategy is around learning walks, where administrators are going to be walking into classrooms in each other's buildings and looking for rigor and relevance, and this is part of our approach around deprivatization of practice. The fifth approach is around some pretty substantial work around administrative professional development to make sure that our administrators actually can recognize what challenging practice looks like. And then lastly is data collection, end-of-course assessments, survey data, et cetera. So this is a multifaceted approach to what appears to be a pretty simple EL partial compliance, but one that we care a lot about and we're worried about. And I know that for the last 2 years, we as a team, the board and myself, have talked about challenge in the middle and our concerns around challenge in the middle. So those are some of the things that we're doing about this particular problem, and I do think that partial compliance is appropriate rating for this particular EL. Any additional questions on EL 6? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
This one has a fair amount of AP data, but then at the elementary level,
I think if you move your mic a little closer to you, I think we might have better luck.
Okay. How are we doing? I am not radioactive. Not lately. All right. But the Quest program is shown as some of the supporting data, and I was curious on this. We don't have the absolute numbers, as we've got proportional representation from minority groups.
Okay.
Turn off your big one.
One of those days. All right. Are we live? Yeah, we're live.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have the absolute numbers for the Quest stuff, and I was curious about that in terms of as sort of evidence of support for high achievement. Mm-hmm. What fraction of our elementary kids are accessing that?
It's the top 2% access Quest, and it I believe it's is it 2% including pullout, or is it 2% plus pullout? Okay, so it's 2% are in all full-time Quest, take full-time Quest spots, and another 1%, I believe. So it's the top 3% of the population are in the Quest program writ large, 2% in all day and 1% in pullout.
Right. So out of 12,000 odd kids, we've got about 360.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, I'm really interested in 90 to 97%, and I don't see them represented in the data here.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to move us on to tab 13, which is instructional material selection. And again, this EL is all in compliance. Any questions about tab 13?
Diane? Oh, I'm still live. Okay, good. Sorry. I did warn you of sorry, I didn't warn you of this one, but I just want to reiterate my concerns around 8.1 for parental involvement. And
Is that in here?
8.1's the appropriate input from.
Following groups.
Okay.
And I guess one of my concerns arises from the fact that I've sort of been following the IMC stuff over the last year, and our IMC has never done anything but ratify things that came up to them. So it's
Not in the past, in my experience. Maybe this year, but there
In the
have
past,
been.
there have been.
There be in their minutes that they're.
That's the whole thing. I've been looking at what has come to us in our proposals from them. There haven't been any, other than that one social studies text that was basically in the news elsewhere.
Yeah, there have been in the past.
And it
so,
may be the kinds
yeah.
of books that have been submitted. A lot of times, the things that you'll find, just from history of IMC, that they don't approve necessarily, tend to be around novels, and that is they're looking for, are they offensive, are they, and that kind of stuff.
And this.
And that's usually their biggest task is that.
It just keeps coming back to some of my basic concerns that we have a single IMC with parents on it for the entire district for all subjects, which really is quite a burden on the parents who are on there. It is not a trivial group to sit on. And I'm still trying to find ways that we can increase parental participation in the process. I don't really, given the late hour, want to delve into this, but I did want to let you know that Bellevue has parents on the selection committee for MAF now, too. So Mercer Island has caved, Bellevue has caved. I think we're the only holdout.
So are you concerned with curriculum adoption, or are you concerned, because the IMC goes beyond, curriculum adoption is more huge committees, 2-year process, and IMC is the final.
Right, exactly. And the IMC
review.
is the point at which parents come in. It's the final review. So the committees don't involve.
Well,
Exactly
actually, that's
true.
not true, Chris. We've been very deliberate about making sure that there's lots of opportunities for parental input through community meetings, through coming in and looking at the textbooks. And we've talked a number of times about math specifically, about meetings out in the community so that we can have parent engagement. And as a matter of fact, that is what we agreed to the last time we brought up this issue. And we do have parents that are on the IMC that are representative. And I don't think this is an issue of cave or not cave. Frankly, I think that the way that that's framed is a little offensive. I think that this is about making sure that our parent constituencies have ample opportunity in order to give us input on our adoptions, and I do believe that that is happening.
And I continue to I turned it off. Okay. I continue to maintain that input comes after the decisions have been rendered. It is much harder to provide meaningful input when you're down to the point of, do you like this one or not, than at the point of, here are 3 possibilities. Which one of these works for you? And I don't see that the input is being solicited early enough in the process.
And I don't agree with you. I think that we are soliciting input early in the process, and that is a change in process since you came on the board 2 years ago, and that is what we've committed to do. And as you know, I do not believe that it is appropriate to have parents on those curriculum committees, and it's not a position I support.
What I'd like, I guess, because I know Chris has asked for this in the past, and we've talked about having this happen, and especially now with the math coming up, could we, I'm sorry, and really the other 2, well, the social studies that we just did is done, and the language one. But I guess I'd like to see a report back on where those pieces are. I think Chris needs that to show that actually it's happening, where the points are, where the parents are involved, where those opportunities are, and if possible, if we know how many people have been affected.
Sure.
If we have them come here, if they could sign in to say that they've come to see curriculum at the building. If we're out in the buildings and at various buildings, if we could know how many of those occur, approximately how many people attend those. I think that would be a good report to either validate or not the plan that was agreed to have for parents for this math piece in this adoption, is that there was an agreement that there would be places along the way, regular places for parents that would not be waiting until they're down to the last books, that there would be opportunity for the committee to share what process they're going through and what they're looking at, and for parents to respond. That's how I heard it. So I think if we have, and I know right now the work that's probably been done has been a lot of reading and research this first year, so I'm not sure that there's been a lot of opportunity right now to go out, but I would assume from here on that we should see some opportunities for parents.
Yeah, and actually there has been quite a bit of work that's been done this year. Dan, can you talk a little bit about the meetings that have been hosted out in buildings and kind of the scope of those? And I do believe that I put this in a board brief, but I think it's good to get this out in the public meeting.
Well, I think we've had them mention they've occurred. I guess I think it would be important to have more of the data of how many people are we actually impacting, because I think that gets to the issue. If you're going to increase parent involvement, how many parents are we involving?
Right. So we'll get that data back, because I'm not sure I'd be speaking off the top of my head about how many parents are showing up at meetings.
And that's the whole thing. I do apologize for the fact that I got through 6-1. I sent some questions to you.
Yeah.
But I overlooked that 8 was behind it.
Yeah.
So I don't expect that data tonight. I don't expect an answer. But it is something where I appreciate that you are trying to move. I do not feel that it has moved far enough. And that is, this year we've been doing a lot of stuff, and there's been outreach. But what has been done so far is coming up with rubrics. That is, there aren't even any texts on the table. And so what you're soliciting is, am I in favor of mom, apple pie, and understandable curricula? Yes. But I don't think that's particularly useful input.
So, Chris, so let me see if I'm understanding, because we have also that process now of putting materials out on the web and asking parents to give their input back on that. The math stuff, we're not at that point yet, and so we don't have materials to do that. So I think we can get you information on the stuff we've adopted and how much parent input has come in, but I hear what you're saying. I'm really clear, and I'm not sure
and
we're at the point yet where we have books.
I don't need more information on what has happened.
Okay.
My concerns is we are going into something where I care about it passionately.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few issues where you can tick me off so badly that I'll start trying to fire him. And I don't want to go there. And this is something where, because I care so passionately, I have not felt that enough motion has happened on providing for input. Because we're spending a lot of time coming up with rubrics, but even our teachers haven't looked at a curriculum yet, to the best of my understanding.
That's correct.
This is a whole board discussion, though. This is, Chris is one member of the board. This is not the avenue on which we can have this discussion, so we need to figure out a way in which we can have this discussion. Because we were here a year ago, and now we're here again. So I'm not sure when, but 10:40 at night is not when we're going to be able to have this discussion, even though I realize that, it's the first reading on this EL.
And that's why, at the moment, I'm registering concern.
And can I just want to remind you around this particular adoption, the first year is around research, best practice, et cetera. Matter of fact, we made it very clear to both the committee as well as the board that we don't even think about materials until year 2, and that is next year. So that's why there's been no input, because there's nothing to input. Teachers haven't seen it. Nobody's seen it, because we're doing research on best practice, which is our process for all adoptions.
Anyway.
But I still would like to see because I know you've done some math reports and math meetings this year, and so I think it would be helpful to know. And if we know we have any evaluation from from parents, and if we haven't been evaluating parent involvement in this, it probably wouldn't hurt us to think about it in the future, to find out, is it well using of their time? And did
Yes.
they feel that they're valued?
So we'll get numbers and find out what parents had to say about those meetings for you.
That begs a really interesting question. Sorry.
Why don't you just pull Nancy's over?
There you go. That begs a really interesting question. One of the things I would actually be fascinated by is I would like to get feedback from the parent members on the IMC.
Okay.
Feedback about what?
Feedback on the extent to which they consider this an effective input mechanism, and whether there are possibilities for improvement, the parents and the teachers on the IMC. It's an open question, and it's something that can persuade me that I'm out on a limb by myself.
Do you have an appointee on there? Or did you inherit Bob's?
I initially inherited Bob's, and I put my own on later this year.
They should be able to give you some feedback.
But she can't speak for the other parent members. She can, and quite frankly, this is someone where I know her already.
Mine is just coming off of 3 years, my parent, and I can share with you, because I just chatted with her to ask her that exact question. Just this week, I ran into her and I said, tell me about it. And so I can share with you, after meeting, if you don't mind. So we can send other people home. But she had a wonderful experience, and she was, in a way, sorry the 3 years are gone. But, well, no, she's ready to, her son's graduating, so she's ready to move on.
I once had somebody who stayed 5 or 6 years, and he was great. And he did let me know what was going on occasionally, and I needed to.
There it's something where my concern is around the elementary curricula, where there are many subjects to be evaluated. There are people who are there. But if you've got elementary-aged children, I'm sorry, my IMC representative is getting buried with reading books for high school. It's not working well for the amount of time she has to devote to this problem.
Did they do an end-of-the-year evaluation of the committee? I don't remember.
I remember doing it, but it was pretty much when I was on it, it was pretty much a verbal, people going around talking about what was working for them and not. But I need to ask Matt that really specific question about what is the evaluation. Have we done one this year?
Yeah. And it may be helpful to have, over time to see, again, to help the committee, but also to maybe for us to have a better idea of people we're asking to sit on the committee, is it worth their time and to be involved. Okay. Anything else? You okay at this point?
I'm done.
Okay. Anything, Doug, for Ledge?
Very quickly, I'm going to pass out. This kind of illustrates graphically what I was trying to get at with Senator Omig. This kind of shows the moving parts that are inherent in implementation of Senate Bill, and gross Senate Bill, ESHB, rather, 2261. And as you can see, it's kind of an interesting little animal that is, at some point, is going to need to be corralled, and that's why I raised that issue. And more specifically, one of Chip's counterpart, the superintendent of, I believe, Kitsap School District, Greg Lynch, who was a career Army officer before he became a superintendent, drawing on his experience with reorganization in the Army after Vietnam, has raised the whole issue of how all this stuff is going to be focused and funneled into the realms that we inhabit, i.e. the district, the buildings, and that sort of thing. So anyway,
well, you answered the question that I asked him that he didn't have an answer for. Thank you. The timeline.
Anyway, you can cogitate on this. I won't belabor that. The other thing is that, as as I indicated, I think the last meeting we were going to meet as the state legislative committee from our state association met in Lacey on Friday and Saturday. We went over roughly 29 proposals from primarily districts from Eastern Washington that deal, for the most part, with fairly parochial issues, but there were a few exceptions to that. We had a pretty spirited debate over the DREAM Act, which allows immigrant students who were brought here by their undocumented parents to become lawful U.S. citizens. And it was a pretty spirited debate. We had a lot of passion, particularly from Eastern Washington, that they felt. I think it showed the weight of our shaky economy right now and people's attitudes towards their fellow human beings. I'll put it that way. But it did. Yakima's proposal relative to the DREAM Act did pass 10-6. That was something that WASDA felt was important, that those children should be afforded the opportunity to become citizens. There was a couple of things of interest to us. Vashon Island carried the water for trying to see the levy, the local assistance funding be more beneficial to those districts that are already at their levy lid. And let's see, there was one other issue that was of interest, but I think it is escaping me at the moment. But anyway, so we rejected 12 of the 29 proposals, and in January, or next month, the committee will meet again. So if there's anything you think should be addressed, I can make sure that gets on the agenda. So if there's something that occurs to you that you would like to see addressed by our state association to be included as part of the agenda for 2010, let me know.
And Doug, in case we've got folks may not be watching us now, but the folks that rewatch us over and over again, the reporting and all that, where can someone go to look at the committee reports? Do we know yet where the reports are going to be?
Well, you mean the bill?
From the timeline, for 2261?
Good question.
Plan to report them somewhere, I would hope. As
I think it would be the committee that Senator Omeg was referring to, which I believe he's a part of.
Okay, that was his. I wrote it down. Okay, I'll look at it. But
and
okay.
And I'll see if I can find any more information about that from our state. From Dan Steele.
Okay, that'd be great, because I think sometimes the problem is that they do this work and they do reports, but it's hard to find them so you can read them and know what the actual work is.
But I think the question you just asked reiterates the point I was making earlier, is that there's so many different moving parts. Mm-hmm. How does one really track the whole thing? And so I'm not sure that you're going to like the answer that you get.
Yeah, the other one who might know, I'll check with Byron too, because he kind of keeps track of where those things are. Okay, Soup's report. Anything for us tonight?
Just a couple quick items. First is the performance audit that we conducted last year. There is a requirement in the performance audit that we need to respond to the audit findings, and as you know, our audit findings were small by comparison to the other districts. There is not a public hearing requirement and is not a board action requirement. So what we'll be doing is providing a report to the state around our response to those audit recommendations, and we'll be submitting that during the month of July. When that report is finalized, I'll be sending a copy of that report to the board. Secondly is I just wanted to share with the board that I've received a substantial pile of thank you notes from kids and teachers and others in the organization that were certainly thanking me and also thanking the board for the budget process and the work that has been done around keeping classrooms our priority. So I wanted to pass on those accolades to the board for the work that you've done as well. So, thank you.
Okay, boy, busy night. Always this meeting, every year. Budget's not one that you can allot not enough time for, since it's critical to have it done, explained, and ready to go for next year. Any items for future agenda items? Any debriefing comments? Board member comments? Just so you know, I did take a little bit of offense from Senator Omeg and his remarks about Broadhurst and the fact that he implied that we made our decision not thinking about the safety and welfare of children, and I plan to email him and tell him I disagree with his
I'm going to follow
statement.
up with that, too.
That bothered
To
me a lot.
mention, he took my comment on the way boundaries originated totally out of context.
Yes. So I do plan to respond to him because that was bothersome to me that he made that. It makes us sound like we did our decision totally unfeeling and unthinking, and that was not true. We spent a lot of time and thought about that and used data to make our decision. Okay, next meeting is August 10th. We have the month of July off, work session at 5 o'clock with the 7 o'clock board meeting. And that will be the time for the budget approval. And again, a reminder, folks want to respond or comment about the budget. They want to get the materials. They may do so, and they can email board members or they can go to the website. They can contact the Public Information Office. Those are options for everyone to do if they would like to. Motion to adjourn, please.
We adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Nancy, Doug, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.